that the speakers that my colleague Brian has put together for this conversation. I'm really excited about the depth that we're going to have this morning, but also even to thank you for showing the interest and to participate in this level of a conversation. Somebody yesterday told me when they saw the reminder for this forum and said, Paul, do you really want to talk about again the budget? We actually even forgot about it. I know. We forget about it because there's no slow day in this country. While we are here, something else is happening somewhere. I can tell you the biggest conversation now is the cabinet, but by tomorrow, it will not be the cabinet. It might be something else. But we cannot forget this kind of conversation that are really, really important because they do affect our daily lives. And big one like this one is a very important conversation for me because I think the civil society needs to have a space to be able to influence some of these processes, and maybe we are the people to start somewhere in creating the spaces that we need to have so that we can share our views. And I think that the boldness that we need to have as a civil society is to make sure that whatever we put out there that can be interacted with by the executive or other levels of governance has potential to improve the quality of life. Because at the end of the day, it's civil society organizations that are working at the coalface in meeting people's needs on a daily basis. And I believe that we can be able to do that together. But the answers are in this room. How do we go about doing that? And so with those few words, on behalf of Conrad and the New Stifton that funds DDP and the team that has put this together, DDP team, I really want to welcome you. Thank again our speakers who have made time to be with us, our online community that is joining us virtually, but also to say, please enjoy networking and our hospitality. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. So I did this on purpose. I planned this morning that when I wake up, I'm not going to wear my belt because I don't like austerity. No, thank you so much. That's a good one. If you don't get it, if you know, you know. No, thank you very much, Paul. I think it's an important starting point, especially as it relates to how this affects us directly. I'm going to read a bit of an excerpt from the Peter Maritzburg based organization that speaks to economic justice in the country. And they do a lot of data around the household affordability index in our country. And so some of that data reads as follows. So the February 2023 household affordability index, which tracks food price data from 44 supermarkets and 30 butcheries in Johannesburg, which includes Soweto, Alexandra, Tembisa, and Hillbrow. In Durban, which includes KwaMashu, Umlazi, Ispingo, Durban CBD, Hammersdale, Pinetown, and Umtubatuba. Cape Town, which includes Khayelitsha, Gugulethu, Philippi, Langa, Delft, and Denun. And Pietermaritzburg, which Pietermaritzburg and Springbok in the Northern Cape, shows that in February 2023, the average cost of the household food basket is 4,928 rands 34. That's an average. Month on month, this cost of the food basket increased by 10 rand 91 cents, which is 0.2%. From January 2023 to February 2023, it increased by 0.2%. Year on year, this average cost of the household food basket increased by 572 rand 64, which is 13.1% from February 2022 to February 2023. So how many of you have had a salary increase above 10% for the past year? How many of you have had a salary increase above 10% for the past 3 years? So when we talk about what is a salary increase, what even is that? What does that look like? You know, I love, yeah, guys. So when we talk about how it affects us directly, those are the lived realities. And when we consider the amount of job losses over the period of the COVID lockdown, the resulting looting that occurred just in the middle of COVID, the impact of the strain that the economy has been having on individual lives and livelihoods has been quite significant. So it's important that when we track these things, we think not only about the broader macroeconomic impact, what does it mean when the ANC institutes a certain policy, but it's about what effect does it have on us and the communities that surround us in sort of real terms? Maybe let's start it differently before we get the people in the room to prompt us on various subject matter. Can I ask, in the room, what are some of the things that stood out for you in the ways in which the budget speech was presented? When you got the invitation to be a part of this forum, what was interesting for you to want to try and engage on and talk about in that instance? Is there anyone in the room who would like to talk to us about what prompted them to be a part of this engagement, and perhaps what are some of the gaps in the budget speech for them? Yes, ma'am. The mic, you can please use the mic. So what prompted you to be a part of this discussion? And perhaps as a background question to that, what were some of the things that you observed in the budget speech that stood out for you, or were concerning for you, or were exciting for you in the ways in which it was started? Some of us are quite saddened by the continued, it seemed we're bearing the burden of the rest of the country, man. Us people who like cigars and alcohol, the syntax has gone up quite significantly. Hey, and you can't even forget about your problems anymore because it's expensive to do that. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning to everybody. I am very excited and happy to be here because many times I tried to come and I was held back because of the weather and my grandkids. So today I actually left my grandkids for somebody safely. And
I thought you said to hell with those grandkids.
When we come to March, the thing is concerning me leaving the budget speech for the moment. It's about March. March is marching month. As it is everywhere, they're marching and stopping traffic and whatever, the universities. So that's a bit concerning because that also affects our economy. Right. But generally speaking, I'll be quite honest to you. When the budget speech came, I don't know whether it was load shedding or whatever, I didn't get to see it. So thank God to Google. I actually Googled it and I got the key points of the budget.
Yeah.
And one of the things I was a little excited about is because now I'm a recipient of the social grant. So first time I saw 100 rand increase. But anyway, I'm used to getting that certain amount, so I didn't really worry. But the biggest thing that I saw on that budget was a bit concerning is what about the ESCOM. I'm sure everybody know about the ESCOM thing. So I did see some good points about the ESCOM where they allocating some money for infrastructure and for the existing stuff like 185 billion, and it's structured down, and ESCOM is not allowed to borrow at the moment. That was one of the things. So there is something getting done. Hopefully it gets done because it affects every single, whether it's a little kid or whoever.
Yeah.
Right, that was it. And the other thing I did see was about government giving some concession to business and individuals where they can get solar or whatever, a certain percentage. And there was no change in the tax. So what I saw generally concerning all the years, I never really look at it so much, but because I was coming here, I said, you know what, I have to get a bit more knowledgeable about it. So generally, the only thing was concerning was ESCOM, but the thing is because we are in a crisis at the moment, so I was excited about that. But generally, I saw a lot of things like the tax thing, like where you can invest the tax savings. So there was this thing where we can invest like 550. So there were majority what I saw. That's not. I don't think I have much knowledge, but I felt it was quite okay.
Yeah.
But I don't really know, honestly speaking.
Yeah.
The people with more experience will know.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. My name is Hansa Naika, and I belong to one of the organizations in Phoenix. It's called Starwood Ladies Support. We offer support to the domestic workers, to the abused women. It's a lot of people had problems. Every single house, if you look at it today, they've got some sort of problem. So we actually have to support. But I was into politics, but now I'm apolitical. I was chosen twice as a DA ward councillor, but right now I'm apolitical. I serve my community with whatever I can.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Your feedback was quite layered, but I want to start at I'm political, but not political. I'm apolitical. I was political, but I'm not political anymore. Yeah, I think it's interesting. Too much of red tape. How our political system is currently structured. It means people disengage because they're not happy with the party system, but politics is always concerned about us. So whether you think you're not political or not, and the budget is quite a political statement. The things that government prioritizes and doesn't prioritize are all political instruments. So it's important that we are aware of that. You also mentioned about your organization and that works with domestic workers. For those of us who are privileged enough to have domestic help at home, have we thought really about whether we can afford that domestic help? You might be putting someone through a system that is akin to slavery because you feel you need additional help at home, but you haven't offered them an increase in the past 3 years. You don't offer them necessarily a living wage in the ways in which it's structured. And the 3,500, I know it's not affordable for a significant majority of South Africans, and you feel like maybe 3.5 and less, at least she's getting something. No, think seriously about the ways in which people deserve dignity through the money that we pay them. Think about yourself in your space of employment. Would you be willing to accept anything less than what you're getting? And if you are currently you're uncomfortable with, what are the avenues that you have to lobby and advocate for yourself in that space? And do you feel that people who are domestic employees have the same bargaining power as you do? And so those are some things that we need to also critique about ourselves and the ways in we engage with the economy in that sense, as employers, as people who give opportunities to others. For organizations, if you're offering unpaid internships to young people and you think you're helping, are you really helping? What is the cost? Crystal will talk to us later about the cost of employment or seeking employment for young people, because that's part of the research that the organization does. Are you thinking about the taxi and the cost of a taxi? The taxis have gone up like 10 times since 2020. Like, it's ridiculous. I've been privileged enough to not have to take one for a while. But when I did have to take one, I was like, since when? Since when does this cost this much? Because the last time I paid probably at least 10 Rand less than what it currently costs at the moment. And that wasn't long ago, it was like 2 years ago. So in 2 years for a taxi to cost 10 Rand more is quite significant. And so, of course, the cost of petrol is something that we have to face every time. But at the same time, it's very different when you think about the cost of taking public transport. And you call it public transport as though the infrastructure for public transport exists. It doesn't. Trains are constantly not working or not arriving on time. People wake up at 3 a.m. just to be able to get to work at 8:30 at 8 o'clock. And yet they bear the brunt of the critique and the criticism from the middle class, from the rich, who say, these guys are lazy. What do you mean? These guys don't get to see their kids or raise them up in various instances. So maybe it's also important that we as citizens, people who have the means to go and Google a speech, for instance, who have access to data, have access to information, to think differently about the ways in which we engage with other parts of our citizenry. So that, in short, ladies and gentlemen, was a way to try and pass time very strategically, because our first speaker of the day, Umbalintuli, needed some printing done. Can you give her a round of applause? No, I'm joking. I hope it was useful, though. So let's welcome, but you can be anywhere. You're mic'd up, so you can either be at the front, at the podium, you can be walking around. It's up to you, really. But since you have some printed materials, I'd suggest you be at the top. Balintuli, so who doesn't know who Balintuli is, guys? Raise your hand. Okay, cool. No, it's important to ask. Mbalintuli is a former MPL, so former KZN Provincial Member of Parliament. She is the CEO of Groundwork Collective at the moment, and she is driving various initiatives around the country to try and reach a very grassroots communities, in particular related to farming. And one of her key things that I've appreciated about Mbali's work is the ways in which she created a movement in Northern KZN for a political party that wouldn't necessarily be attractive to that constituency, and trying to find ways and inroads in spaces that were somewhat closed off for that political party. But I think that work speaks for itself. The numbers speak for themselves insofar as her achievements in that regard. So she'll be speaking to us specifically around what is the point of all of these things, these instruments? What is the point of SONA? What is the point of the budget speech? And perhaps a bit more in terms of what she was able to glean initially from these presentations that were given by the president, as well as the Treasury at various instances. So welcome, Bali. We appreciate you for being here. Let's give her a round of applause again.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, all right. Good morning, everyone. Sanbonani, thank you very much for inviting me. As Paz said, I was someone who was a former politician for 15 years. So I started off as a councillor, and then I became an MPL for 2 terms. So a lot of what we deal with and what we're going to be talking about today, I used to do as part of my daily job. But when I left politics, and I left it because I was getting so irritated with the slow pace of what people were actually doing, and what I felt was sometimes a very big lack of commitments from people that had power to do things. I left it and I thought, well, I'm one of the very few people who's had the experience now of being on the other side of politics, and I could go start a political party, or I could go join another political party, but I think that everyone's quite tired of politicians that do that, and that it's important for those of us who care about this country to go back into communities and to try and work. And one of the other parts of the organization that I've started that we do is that we're working with civil society and civics. And so what I'm going to speak about today, obviously, is going to relate to the budget, but more importantly, for you to take something out of it, I want to speak about how civil society can use this process and this budget to get what you need for your organizations out of it. Because I think there's a bit of a disconnect in our country. Most of the time, our civil society organizations don't want to be political. And I can understand why, because often our governments can be very harsh on people that seem to oppose them. But I think the time has come now in South Africa where you don't have to be partisan, but you have to understand that there are means and tools of being political that are going to have to be utilized if we want to kind of have any kind of change. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just briefly take you back to the very beginning, and please don't feel infantilized. I have a reason for it, about what is the budget and what's the actual process. What happens when a budget is being put together? What happens in that sense? Then I want to go into SONA and the budget so that we can actually see whether these two things speak to each other. And then I want us to look a little bit at some of the things that I think are important, particularly for a KZN perspective on the budget that we saw coming out. And then to just speak a little bit about then what civil society can do and where civil society can have its best, I think, interventions into getting what it wants out of the budget process. So what's the budget? Obviously, every February, we have the Minister of Finance. He comes and he stands up in Parliament and he presents what is the budget. And this budget is basically what is a synopsis of everything of the country's finances, our debts, our spending plans, our tax increases for the year. And it's across all spheres of government, across all kinds of SOEs, and he tables it in a number of bills. So he gives the appropriation bills, he gives the division of revenue bills, he gives the legislation that comes with that budget speech to say, this is what the money is for, and this is how we are going to finance different things that we have said are priorities of government. Now, after that, you have to remember that this is not the first time that this budget has been put together. Every budget takes 14 months to prepare. So before he even stands up in Parliament to give that speech, that budget has already gone through 14 months of preparation beforehand, looking at the different priorities of every single municipality, province that have fed into what becomes eventually our big budget. Ooh, sorry, and our appropriation bills. And I want you to remember this because it means that you have 14 months from when our minister tabled it to the next budget to make sure that you can get whatever it is that you want to get. And it's a similar process for the legislature, but obviously shorter timeframes. So whenever you see him, that's because it's taken that much time for a budget to be put together. Also important to remember, the budget that he presents on the day, aside from if he says that there are going to be tax increases, which are usually implemented the very next day, does not mean that every single thing in that budget is now set in stone. You still have time because there's still going to be committee hearings, there's still going to be chances for civil society and anyone that wants to still have a say to actually be able to say whatever it is that they think about that particular budget at the different forums and be able to change it if needs be. So even though the minister has already given his budget speech, now begins the process thereafter for us to be able to get into the different avenues for you guys, possibly your legislatures, or we'll get into that, where you can now influence whether that's going to be set in stone. Obviously, because we have such a large majority of one party at a national level, it hasn't been seen that that has always been the case. But I think we are starting to see now, especially where we are getting coalitions in different municipalities, that there is more and more space for civil society to, even if you want to play off political parties against each other. And last week, I think just on the 28th, there was a huge march of civil society outside the legislature talking about DSD not giving funding to different types of civil society groups or different types of, what do you call it? NGOs. Thank you so much. I just completely lost that word. And now that's something that they must consider and something that they must do something about. So there's still time for everyone to do something. So that's the budget cycle. So it's taken 14 months to prepare. It's got the medium-term budgets. It's been something that's had planned expenditure, and it's gone through a process. After he tables it now, obviously it's going to go to the different committees. They're going to have those discussions. And it will move to the different chambers and the different departments to see what happens. When it gets to those departments, what they are supposed to do is they're supposed to say, okay, let's say education has 50 million set in for itself. What did education do with the money that was sent last year? Did they do what they were supposed to do? And what is it they're saying they're going to do with the money that's given this year? At that particular juncture, you as civil society or me as an ordinary person have the ability to go to those meetings, to go to those hearings, and to put forward your cases. And this is where I'm saying that I think civil society needs to be far more strategic about kind of getting their influence on the strategies of the budgeting process of this country. If nobody says to these politicians that this is stupid and that there's no point in you budgeting this way because you're the ones that are working on the ground on a daily basis and know what's actually going to work, they will never know. Believe me, just because they're on those positions does not mean that they know too much about what is actually happening on the ground. In fact, I would honestly tell you that the majority of you know better about what's happening in your communities and the needs than they do. But if nobody tells them, they're going to assume, or they're going to go with what consultants tell them who have Googled stats and have decided that, I don't know, Durban doesn't really have a GBV crisis or whatever, and they will allocate money on that basis. So it is incumbent upon you that if your society, or sorry, if your organization is fighting for something, that you are in those meetings to say, no, actually, this is how you should be allocating money for this particular cause or case. And that is your right, and you're allowed to be there. Don't listen to them if they say that you cannot be in those rooms. And if they make a big fuss about it, then that's great, because then what you want to do is you want to get the media on it, and then you want them to say on public record on what grounds that they would be excluding people from the people's house. So that's what I mean about you can get political without being partisan. And that's a great cause for any organization, I think, to take on behalf of all of us. So anyway, so that's where the next part of it goes. And so thereafter, they are supposed to then have the the process then voted into, and then it becomes what will become the budget for the rest of the year. In between this, obviously, the AG and the SCOPA budget and the SCOPA committee would have also said whether or not that department has spent their money well. Sorry, so I'm just been giving you a big overview of what the actual process is. Now, to the second part about whether SONA and the budget speech of this year spoke to each other. SONA, when the president stands up and tells us that he is giving us the State of the Nation address, is supposed to tell us what the priorities of government are. But remember, because it takes 14 months for a budget speech to be prepared, the president cannot be speaking about something that's going to happen in 1 year. He can't say, we want to build a new coal station and then have a budget that's going to build it in 1 year and then you write it off the books. So often when you're listening to a SONA speech and the priorities that he sent, when you listen to the budget speech, you also need to see what was said last year in order to see whether it's still matching up with the priorities of this year and whether that has been financed for this year, because obviously nothing's going to be happening in 1 year. And this is the big problem that we have in South Africa. And our government knows this. They know that every year they must just put 5 or 6 things that are going to have everyone's attention so that we can forget what they said that they were going to do last year. Do you remember a few years ago, we were told we were going to have a smart city? I think KZN, we were also told we were going to get something like, I think at the time it was like 730 million for amanzi and water infrastructure. Then we had the floods. And then a bunch of us starting to ask, hey, Bokabe, Akshango, Guti. Then we have to like ask ourselves. And that's because they figured out that we only look at the speech this year and think that it's about this year. But when you look at SONA, it's about government's priorities, but then they must go forward into the budget speech that must take into account at least a 3-year cycle. So whenever the minister is giving that kind of speech, you need to look if it also categorizes and caters for what happened the year before and what's going to happen the year after. And they mustn't give us excuses. They have 14-month periods to be able to look at both types of ways to forecast. And this is again where to give civil society the movements to be able to at any point intersect in that process to say, this is where we think we could be feeding in, this is what we think we need to do, we should be doing. And so that's where SONA and the budget should really be talking to one another. But because in South Africa, again, we've had such a big majority of one party, no one has been able to ever really successfully say, this needs to be challenged. And I don't think any political party is going to be able to. I think you can see how childish our politicians are and how unable they are to speak sense and to be pragmatic, even when it's something that's going to work for all of one. Who doesn't want electricity? It doesn't matter what party you're in, who doesn't want that electricity to work? But to get them all to agree on one thing is like trying to get, I don't know, children to stand in a line quietly. And so it might just be that civil society is going to have to band together to force the conversation, or if they're not willing to make them understand that there are going to be other means by which we're going to replace them. And I think that that's really the last option that we're left with, because if these two things don't speak to each other, then we mustn't even have the conversation about do we monitor and evaluate, because we can't even do that if at the very beginning, these two things didn't talk to each other. So if the president said we're going to build a power station, but there wasn't enough money put into the budget over the number of years that it was required, then don't go and look and see if that power station has been built, because it has not been built. And that is the story of South African politics. You hear that a school will be built, someone says there'll be money, then there's no money, then there's no school. And that's for everything, clinics, whatever you want. And you'll go there, you'll try and evaluate, there'll be nothing to see because the budgets, the priorities, they've never matched, and there's never been anyone who's actually gone back to say, I think maybe. And every single year, the AG will say, ringing alarm bells, hey, the money wasn't used right, you didn't get a qualified audit. And we will come back every year discussing the same thing because no one will be holding them to account. And so really are in a difficult position because we have so many priorities in South Africa at the moment. We have so many pressing issues, the high cost of living, unemployment, the fact that we actually have so many issues like collapsed SOEs, ezomvelo, asinawo amanzi, ingonyama trust yethu ayisebenzi. We have the highest child stunting of the whole entire country. We have children that are so malnourished that by the time they get into school, they can't even really be able to be taught anything because they haven't had proper food. That's KZN, that's right here in our backyard. But do you hear anyone speaking about that? Did you hear anything about that in SONA or SOPA? Was there any money that was allocated at any kind of thing like that? No. And so we will continue to have these kinds of issues unless we are going to be the ones putting the priorities on the table, because the government is not going to put priorities on the table that they don't seem to care about. And right now, the big buzzwords are obviously ESCOM for good reason, and maybe like some solar. But there are so many other issues that should have been in the budget and should have been there. And for me, because I don't want to take too much into Tessa's time, because I think she'll unpack it more. But for me, I just want to give you a couple of things that I think must be some priorities that we look into very quickly across the country, but particularly in KZN. We must relook the spheres of government. This thing of national, provincial, municipalities, it's not working. By the time you get to the municipal level, they will tell you that they can't do something because province actually controls it, but they must actually build it. So they're building the houses, but province gives the money. No one knows who actually is in charge. They'll tell you, this is a provincial road, this is a municipal road. No one wants to fix the parcel because they're not really sure where the money is going to come from. Same thing with what we have with the floods, what we have with the water. How are we allowing ourselves to not be smart enough to actually take care of this issue? And the conversation has been had for so many years. I think Nkosazana Zuma was still young even when the conversation started. 74 months. And now she's now in charge of youth in Zweden. So, I mean, for me, this is a big issue, because one of the reasons, even with ESCOM, that we have an issue is that municipalities earn ESCOM over 50 billion. But you and me, whether it's prepaid or whether we metered, whether ESCOM's on or not on, we must still pay. So what we could have been saying all this time is, when we get this division of revenue that the Minister of Finance speaks on, why can't we take some of that money to municipalities and say, oh, Masipala, whilst ESCOM is busy trying to fix whatever coal or whatever issues that they have, because there's so many, or Masipala can also be supplementing themselves to be able to provide electricity for us. It's not impossible. It's being done in some other provinces. Why is KZN, when we have the best wind and the best sun, are we not able to do that? And then that could also be a way to actually generate economy and money for ourselves. We should be the best province in every single respect, but we seem to have the most dumb politicians, honestly. Anyway, so I think we must relook the spheres of government very, very quickly. I think municipalities in the way that they are structured are not conducive to us being able to have quick and fast and efficient service delivery. And I think it gives them a very easy excuse to always say, oh, but, governments, one. Mkhanyakude has Jozini Dam, which is the biggest dam in the province, but Abantu Mkhanyakude don't have water. And when you ask them what's happening, oh, but Minister, Cape Town, it doesn't make sense, guys. Give that power to the people that are closest to the ground so that they can service people quickly. It shouldn't be something that's difficult for us. So I really think that division of revenue that we were told about this year should be something that we should be looking at municipalities. And then, I mean, there's lots that I can say. Professionalization of civil service. We need to be changing our budget priorities. For us, water is a huge issue more than anything. The fact that children are suffering in the way that they are should be something that our government should be taking seriously. Our SOEs, our land use is not used properly. Then the fact that there's no dignity for our young people. The other day, Tusi driving past Mr. Price, there was a line of 3,000 people. It was so long that it caused a traffic jam because people were waiting to apply for 3 posts for a security guard. And you know that those people are still the ones that are looking, that have just given up. And yet, ESONA or in the budget speech, did you hear anything about how we plan on really trying to tackle the unemployment crisis? They've given up themselves. Now we're just trying to make sure, hey, okay, so I guess because Abaz, and we haven't had a proper economic policy, I would say, for years. When was the last time you heard anything about the National Development Plan, the NDP? Remember how big that was at some stage? Huge documents, never implemented. But the point is, we don't have a government that has priorities that speak to the way that the budget works. And I think that this year we had the same issue, but I do think that there is enough space for civil society within that 14-month period to be able to insert the priorities that they have for their organizations and to force the government to start looking into what's best for the communities that you guys service and what's best for being able to get them to redirect money the way that it should be. There's a lot of money that goes to useless things all the time. And if you look at some of the budgets that are going to come out, particularly in KZN, because you're there, you'll be shocked at how much money is going to silly things that we don't need. And I think that that could be enough for you guys, even together collectively, like they did last week for 2DSD, and have forced DSD to now amplify money that they're going to pay to NGOs to start relooking at that. So I'll leave it there so that I don't take into Tessa's time. But thank you. I look forward to the questions.
Thank you very much. Siyabonga Mbali. Our speaker, the initial speaker in the morning, spoke about March being a marching month. And perhaps this is a prompt for civil society in KZN to be a lot more proactive in the way in which we think about engaging with government. I think in some respects, we've been biding our time. We've been watching things and observing. We haven't been as quick to get onto the streets as our counterparts. For instance, in Johannesburg and in the Western Cape, I've seen a lot more protests happen, organized protest at least. I know that we protest in our streets. For instance, Spingo yesterday, people are on the streets demanding certain things, but how do we ensure that those are organized to the extent that memoranda can be drawn up and taken to the right offices and stuff like that? But yeah, it's very interesting. I think one of the things that I was looking forward to, I think 5 years ago, we were told about an aerotropolis, which seems to be taking longer than what had been planned for. The aerotropolis would have been building a city close to the airport. And so hotels, infrastructure for inducing investment, encouraging investment. But of course, there were some challenges as well. One of the key partners there was Tonga Tulit. And we know what Tonga Tulit has been going through. It's been going through the most at the moment. And so sometimes our government is waits for private industry to decide or to determine the mandate when it comes to investment. And so if you look at the ways in which land use, at least around Umhlanga and those types of areas, is it practical for the ways in which development ought to be happening? Does it make sense for all of these people to be essentially creating more of an issue around the ways in which access to housing is being exclusionary? It's being created as though only those who can afford can start to live in certain spaces, but it also creates problems because they need people to work in those areas. And so the only way people can have access to employment and close is to start creating informal settlements, because you can't be living in Verulam and working in Umhlanga, for instance, because of the ways in which we have public transport infrastructure that doesn't exist. So people will want to create an informal settlement in Blackburn in order to be closer to Umhlanga for access to employment. So those are some of the things that don't get looked at closely enough, but that have a large impact on the ways in which people engage with the economy and other systems. So I'd like to invite our next speaker, who's going to prompt us to continue to think about this. And then, of course, after that, we'll have a plenary discussion around some of the things that might have stood out for you in the initial two presentations. Tessa Dooms is a friend of DDP, a colleague, an activist, socio-political analyst, and the director of Rivonia Circle, which has been doing amazing work across the country for communities and for young people in particular. And we look forward to engaging with you about what are some of the key priorities that you might have seen both in SONA as well as the budget speech, and how do they speak to the political motivations and political motives in the country, as it were. Tessa Dooms, director of Rivonia Circle. A round of applause, please.
A little intimidating to have a mic and see a mic, so I'm a bit confused. My brain is confused. Good morning,
I can help you
everyone.
out with that.
Yeah. Just
Sure, go for it.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Very good to be in your city this morning. So my mother made me wake up at 4 a.m. So if I doze off during this, it's not my fault. But yeah, so I want to start just by giving an overview, not of the budget in its details, but just of what I think this budget speech, even more than what President Sona's speech was about, right? So that when you go and reread it, I want you to think about this, is that, as Mbali said, the budget speech is a political speech, right? It is not an overview of the entirety of the budget. The entirety of the budget document is about this thick. It's a very, very dense, detailed document. And what we get is a 4-5 page speech. That speech tells us what the priorities of government is for the next 12 months or so. It doesn't tell us all that we need to know about the budget. And part of the difficulty that we have as society is that we're not getting the entire budget. There aren't enough organizations, there aren't enough people in government itself committed to actually breaking down the entirety of the budget. But what we see in the speech this year, and again, even more so than in the SONA, because I think there was a big disjuncture between the SONA and the budget speech this year. I think it was a wild disjuncture between the two, is that this government is focusing in this speech on 2024, on the things that it needs to do to win the election. So a big focus on electricity, not surprising given load shedding. And Fikile Mbolola, as the head of the ANC, and well, the Secretary General now, kind of gave us the hint about that, saying, in the next 12 months, we're going to be done with load shedding, just in time for the election. So there's definitely going to be a focus on at least trying to mitigate load shedding in the lead up to the election. A second big focus in this budget was basic service delivery. Now, I love basic service delivery. It's my favorite thing when government says it's going to provide toilets, because that's exactly what we need to be doing. But the question is this a short-term measure to win an election, or is it a long-term priority that's got a systemic program of action that's actually going to be implemented? And one of the hints to the answer to that question is the part about municipalities within the budget, where questions need to be raised about government's grants, because the municipality operates in two ways in terms of its finances, getting grants from government, and then we, of course, pay the municipality rates and taxes and all of those things, and we pay our water bills and our light bills, and we fund the municipality. And so there's a discussion in the budget about making sure that municipalities are resourced enough in order for that delivery to happen. The thing that the budget doesn't tell us is also important, right? Number one, there are things about other parts of our economy that matter that were not in that budget speech. So how are we going to fund things like education? What are the, especially if the focus is going to be on the things that were mentioned, is there going to be compromises on the things that weren't mentioned? So we must ask, is the education budget still going to be as high as it was, or is it going to be reduced? Is the health budget going to be as high as it was, or is it going to be reduced? Are we going to have to give up certain things to get others? And I think that politically, that speech didn't help us answer those questions, right? The other thing it didn't help us answer very well is, where is the money going to come from, and how will we know the money is spent well? So the income of the money and the monitoring and evaluation. And those are the two things I wanted to speak about a little bit today. So just so that we think about it holistically, the purpose of a budget is not limited to what we spend, right? We must think about how we're getting money into the fiscus. So a lot was made in this budget, and rightfully so, I think, across the last few budgets, about the fact that SARS is collecting more taxes now than it has before. Now, the sleight of hand there is the idea that maybe there are more taxpayers to collect from. No, that's not actually what happened. What happened was SARS wasn't collecting well for a long time. And now SARS is collecting better. So it looks like we have more tax money at a nominal sense, when actually we just have better tax collection than a broader tax base. And that's a problem for us. It's a problem related to unemployment, because the fewer people who are employed, the fewer, the less income tax we can get, right? The fewer businesses there are, the less business tax we can get. The fewer people who are becoming more upwardly mobile in terms of their income, the less taxes we can get. So as the unemployment numbers at best stagnate or have these very incremental increases, which we can talk about, whether they're real or not. I have a huge issue with the idea that the 32% unemployment rate that has moved from 33% in the last quarter is a real thing, because nobody's talking about the discouraged work seekers who are now just not looking for work anymore. But that's a different conversation. It's pocket. But what has the tax base grown or shrunk? Are we getting more coming into the system or not? I don't think that this budget has answered that question. I think it's fundamentally a question that we must have answered adequately if we know, what our situation is. The second thing is the question about investment. The president, this particular president, has made a lot about investment summits over the years. We've heard about investment summits, yeah? The president talks about, now, where is that accounted for? So if the president says, I've had an investment summit and we have a commitment of 30 billion that's going to come into the fiscus, where is it going into? Is it going into the communal pot? Is it going to particular sectors of the economy and not going into the fiscus at all? Is it going into particular projects? Is it going into particular infrastructure projects? Again, there's a lack of accountability about that in the way that we think about the budget and where the money is coming from, right? Then there's the question about debt. What we heard about in this speech is something that we must start paying attention to, is how much are we paying in debt every year? So we're taking out loans. How much are we paying in debt every year? One of the things that struck a lot of people who looked carefully at the numbers is that we're now starting to pay year on year more in debt than we spend on education. And education is our largest line item generally in our budget. Is that sustainable? Is that okay? Or are we placing a burden on future generations to have to pay for the debts that are being taken out now? Now, debt is not necessarily a bad thing in and of itself, right? Especially at the level of a country. Economists will often remind us that a country's budget and a household budget are not the same. So you don't treat the two the same. That when a country is borrowing, what it's borrowing to do, what should be borrowing to do, is invest. Many times when households are borrowing, they're borrowing to spend, right? You're borrowing to consume rather than to invest. Very few of us borrow to invest unless you're investing probably in a house. It's probably the biggest thing that we borrow to invest into. But most of the time in households, you borrow to consume. Now, when a country borrows to consume, then we have a problem. Countries should be borrowing to invest. So more than the number of how much we're paying back in debt, they should be telling us how much are we investing of that money into the country, and when are we going to see the return on that investment, and in what form will that return come? So I want us to reread the speech with those questions about the income in mind. Because the first part of the speech is really that it reflects on income. The last thing that I wanted to say is something around the municipal income model. The pay as you earn, or not pay as you earn, the user pay principle, sorry, that's the word I was looking for, the user pay principle. So in Gauteng, a few years ago, I think it's now almost a decade ago, if I'm not mistaken, we got e-tolls. We got these big tolls that are put into our national highways on the basis that the user is going to pay for the road that they're driving on. We were going to be responsible for that. And debt was taken out in order to build those gantries and to build the roads and then to build the gantries in order for us to pay. See, the problem with a user pay principle is that if the user doesn't have the money to pay, it's going to be a problem. And so something about municipal structure of payment is also linked to our unemployment problem and our inequality problem in the country. Is that poorer communities will have less money than richer communities for the services that they need. And so you are actually we're setting ourselves up potentially for recycling poverty if we continue to exist in a context where people are not getting employed, people are not getting out of poverty, they're not getting out of the economic traps that our society is set up in terms of being an unequal society, and therefore not getting services that keep them poor. And so the problem isn't necessarily the user pay principle, but it's the society that we are doing that in that may not actually be ready for a user pay principle across the board. So we must think about income. So that was the first point I wanted to make. The next thing that I wanted us to reflect on is who spends, right? So the president in the State of the Nation address this year did a lot of throwing around big numbers. He was dropping very big numbers in terms of our spending. And those big numbers are not being spent necessarily in one place all the time, right? So an example for this is an easy one is electricity. So we're spending money on electricity in terms of debt for ESCOM. We're spending money on infrastructure. We're spending money on municipality. We're spending a lot of money that's going to be spread very differently when it comes to how much we spend on electricity. One of the things we must do is track and break down, find the breakdown. And that's going to be in a numerous sources, and we'll talk about that in a moment, of who's actually going to spend that money, right? So the money that is set out for youth unemployment, and Crystal is going to speak about youth unemployment a little bit later. How much of that money is going into the presidency and the president's youth unemployment desk? How much of that money is going to the NYDA? How much of that money is going to various department programs? How much of that money is going where? Who is going to be spending that money? That the money is being spent is not what the quantum is that's being spent is not actually the thing that we need to know. We need to know who's actually going to be spending those different line items. So when the education department, or when we think about education spending might be going to the department, but actually there's an infrastructure part of that that's actually going to be spent by public works rather than by the education department itself. The other thing about spending is whether the spending is going to happen internal to government or outsourced. And this is one of my biggest gripes about the efficacy of our spending in government. There's way too much money that goes into government that government is not itself in a position to spend, which it has to outsource for other people to spend on its behalf. And here I'm not as much worried about, or not as much concerned about, for example, that government is not going to be a construction company, so it's not going to build its own schools. I'm more worried about government spending, for example, 800 million rand, 8 million rand on a consultant to write a document for a policy development that actually it's already hired staff to do. I'm more worried about us outsourcing things that could actually have been done within government. and us paying double or triple for things that government actually should have the competencies and capacity to do. We've gotten into a very, very, very bad cycle in the country of government not only outsourcing its thinking, but it's also outsourcing its spending. Another part of that is how much we pay for procured services. So my colleague Lukona Mnguni has decided that the biggest problem that government has at this point is a procurement problem. If you want to talk about corruption, it's actually a procurement problem, that we have not figured out how to maximize and make procurement efficient, transparent, and not corrupt. It cannot be that government can pay 50 times the price that somebody is selling something in the shop for. It just cannot continue to be the case. That's just become normative within our spending culture. And the only way to know how to deal with that is for us as the public to be aware of who is spending. To always be aware of who's spending, both at the level of the spheres of government, which sphere of government or which entities are spending, and in terms of whether that spending is happening from government direct into the market or through a third party. All right. The third thing I wanted to mention was timeframes, and this is going to go much quicker. That when we look at the numbers that are in the budget, we must ask, is this a 1-year spend or a 3-year spend? Because the budget is actually, every budget is written in 3-year cycles, right? So it's written with a 3-year arc in mind. And so you have to figure out, where are we in the arc of a 3-year spending cycle? And know if that figure represents 1 year of spending or whether it represents 3 years of spending. It makes a huge difference in terms of what we're tracking for. And this becomes particularly important when we think about the outcomes. So Mbali pointed out that the budget is created over a 14-month cycle, right? And that 14-month cycle is kicked off by Treasury basically putting out a call to municipalities, to provinces, to programs, to entities of government, to say, what is your ask? What is your wish? Tell us what your plan is going to be for the next 3 years, and then we will then give you the appropriate budget for the plans that you have made. Great stuff. Those plans, presumably, as we've all written budgets and proposals. It's like us writing proposals to funders. When we write proposals to funders, we are put feet to the fire for what outcomes that money is going to be spent on. Feet to the fire for outcomes. Something that has gone horribly wrong in our budgeting system is that outcomes are not tracked as much as spending ability is tracked. So in fact, our outcomes and the measure, so whether or not the Department of Health is going to get more of a budget this year from last year is not dependent on whether or not they've met all 5 objectives that they set out in their plan. It's whether they've spent all the money or not. And even if the Department of Health meets all of its objectives, but has not spent all the money, they will actually get less money the next year than more. So the Department of Health says, these are the 5 things we're going to do. We did all of those things in record time, and we saved the government X number of rands. They will get penalized for that, and they will get less money next year. Whereas a department that has only done 1 out of their 5 things that they said they were going to do, but spent all the money, will get more money next year. That's the logic that we've built in, because we are not actually tracking for outcomes, we're tracking for spending. So Mbali is correct that as civil society, these are the kinds of things we need to start really interrogating when it comes to the budget process. We need to start asking, on what basis, what's the logics for the kinds of budgets that are put up? Did this department get this budget because they actually have a plan, or because they hosted enough fun, cute events. And anybody who's engaged with government in like the first 3 months of the year, so Jan to like March, all of a sudden the comms budgets for government departments skyrocket. They're hosting dinners, usually they're just trying to spend. Not because there's an objective, but because they just have to get the money out to make sure they get more money next year. We have to have our eye on that. We have to have our eye on whether or not we are getting a return on the investment that we are making, or whether governments are just spending money to spend money to get money, to have money. So, and then the last thing I'll say about outcomes is parliament. The point of a parliament, ladies and gentlemen, is not this knee-jerk reaction that we see our parliamentarians having to things that become topical on Twitter. Honestly, we're noticing parliamentarians go, oh, we need an ad hoc committee over this and that because it's become the important thing in the news cycle. The SONA is actually my least favorite event in our entire political calendar is SONA, because it's superfluous. SONA is not a statutory thing. Parliamentarians get to vote on it for fun, get to debate it for fun. But the budget they get to vote on. Parliamentarians vote on the budget. And so what they should be doing, and not just the full budget, what we're going to be seeing in the next few weeks is departments coming and tabling their budgets. And those are the budgets we actually need to pay a lot of attention to. The devil is in the details. And what each parliamentarian says or does in terms of why they are voting for a particular budget or not should matter to all of us. And we should be able to influence those votes. They are our representatives. And so we must not allow our systems of election, of electing through parties to have us forget that that MP represents us. And so how they vote on a particular budget should matter to us, and they should come and consult us on that. So Parliament needs to do its job in terms of ensuring that the budgets that they pass actually make sense, but they must more importantly do their job of oversight of that budget throughout the year. So when they're calling people in, they're not just calling in a minister because of a scandal. They should be calling in a minister to keep track of that budget and what's being spent. And that's not only calling in the finance minister, it's calling in every single minister, every single entity that has a budget attached to it. The final thing that I want to say is just some critical issues that I think need to be much more important to us in the next 12 months and beyond than the things I think that politically have been highlighted because of the experience of an election. The first thing is economic infrastructure. I think that every budget needs to have a clear plan for economic infrastructure, because what is going to help small businesses, what's going to help young people who are trying to find employment, what's going to help us all be active participants in the economy is having the economic infrastructure, for instance, functional roads and functional public transport, or Wi-Fi, or whatever number of things that we need in the economy to operate and have a proper environment for us to operate in. Those things matter, right? The second thing is the social wage. So every year in the SONA particularly, we get a rundown, well, no, more in the budget actually than the SONA. We get a rundown and we're told to look out for government spending on grants. It becomes a very big topical thing, whether it's gone up by 10 Rand, 20 Rand. The social wage is about more than grants. And we must look at whether government has a holistic plan for social development of this nation. than just grants. Social protection is about more than grants. It's about an entire social system of development in the country. And right now it's been reduced to grants in a narrow way so that we don't ask about what is the social protection that undergirds people in terms of food security, that undergirds people in terms of access to education or healthcare. What are the social safety nets of our society, and are they being properly resourced? Do they work together well? Do we know that if there's a disaster, there's enough money for disaster relief and disaster management rather than just a social relief grant? That entire social wage needs to be something we pay attention to. We need to ask questions about whether the budget invests in people or things. Sometimes our budgets really narrowly just focus on things without a real investment in people. And people can either be an investment in the capacity within the state or an investment in the capacity of us as citizens. And that's not just limited to the education system, by the way. One of the things that I think that the NGO sector needs to really be asking questions about to government is, when are we going to fix the funding of the sector? When are we going to fix the funding of this sector? Because this sector is part of the care economy at minimum. But there's so much skill in the sector that helps with the development of the nation. And government needs to think about us as role players that get funded in the kind of work that we do in terms of community development, in terms of social development. It cannot just be that we continue to have NGO sectors work on vibes. It's not when we have resources in the state. This sector should be funded through the state rather than waiting for some international donor. God bless them all, Shem. But we can't continue on like this. European countries and their social sectors and their NGOs are not sitting and waiting for some foreign government to have mercy on them. Built in their government's budgets is recognizing the work that's getting done in communities by communities and resourcing that work. Why on earth is that a politicized thing in this country? And why is it such a haphazard, ad hoc, not well monitored, and certainly not well used? If we're going to focus on anything as a sector, we must absolutely focus on that thing. And then finally, working on developmental outcomes. The NDP was mentioned, and I stand as accused number one, as somebody who was on the National Planning Commission for 5 years and had to fight from the inside for the NDP to be implemented. National development goals or a developmental objective for a country is absolutely essential if we're going to get anything right. We can't have budgeting that hasn't got developmental goals as a priority and a unified vision of what the state is trying to accomplish. One of the things that most struck me in the work that we did in the NPC was the first thing that we picked up on is that nobody held departments or entities that were presenting their budget proposals to having something from the NDP in it. The NDP was never a resourced document because people could just invent what they wanted to do in their departments based on who knows what, and it would get funded, whether it was part of the government's vision that, or at least the vision that they said they all agreed on or not. That cannot be the way that we do things. And so I want to end with a quote, with actually two, from Amartya Sen, just to remind us that budgeting is not about money. It's about people and development. He says, human development as an approach is concerned with what I take to be the basic development idea, namely advancing the richness of life rather than the richness of the economy in which human beings live. which is only a part of it. How much money we have is meaningless if it does not make the lives of the people in this country richer and better. The people behind the budget is more important than the numbers themselves. And the second one, he says, economics as it has emerged can be made more productive by paying greater and more explicit attention to the ethical considerations that shape human behavior and judgment. And those ethical considerations for us must be, number one, whether or not we are improving the quality of people's lives by how we spend, and number two, whether we are accountable for what we spend within our government. So I'll leave it there and we'll have a conversation.
Thank you very much, Tessa. So on the basis of having conversation, we're going to have the conversation amongst ourselves first, and then we're going to filter that through to the speakers. So what I'd like you to do at your tables is to firstly introduce yourselves. Hi, how are you doing? Very short, very brief, but have a discussion about what are some of the things that stood out for you in the presentations that were given. I think one of the things that I'd asked initially was, what was your motivation for being here? And perhaps tie that to your motivation and see, has part of that been responded to or answered, or what are still some of the gaps that you'd like to ask the speakers directly, or at least ask some of the people in the room about insofar as what your intention was in coming into this room, so that we can then filter those discussions to the two speakers. They can be part of the discussions as well. So if you guys want to move to other tables, or if you feel that table is fine, you're also welcome to decide and determine that as well. And of course, Crystal and our colleagues online are still waiting for us. If you have any questions from the online space, oh, I'm on TV. Please make sure to put it down in the chat section and we'll try to address those questions as well. So you have about 10 minutes for that discussion at your tables. What are some of the key priorities that you had heard, read about, listened to? What are some of the things that stuck out in the presentations that we heard in the morning from Tessa and Mbali? And what are some of the things that are still lingering for you? What are some of the gaps that you still want addressed before we move on to the next segment of our program? Okay, 10 minutes, please. All right. Thank you very much. Let's round up those discussions at the table. Hi, kulega bafung angbugo na kuphela. My 10 minutes was too short. Even if I gave you an hour, you'd still think it's short. All right, colleagues, let's come back. So we have mics located somewhat centrally. And I'd like to hear what the nature of the discussion was at the tables. What came out for you at your tables? Maybe some of that can be unpacked for us. Yes, so we have the first volunteer, Ayabulela. Unless someone has changed that at some point. Unzuza, hey, okay. All right, can we allow Ayabulelo to engage, ask a question or comment, and then we'll have other tables with the same opportunity as well. Ayabulela?
Sangwalan. Hello, everyone. How are you doing?
Maybe you can introduce yourself because you occupy very significant positions in the municipality. So, and the youth desk. Introduce us, just so we know who you are.
My name is Ayabula Lanyao. I am the adolescent and young people's champion for the eThekwini
She's a
district.
champion, guys. Can you give her a round of applause? All right. Thank you.
So Guinea report back here group heads who would see what are the things that stood out for us in our group. Firstly, we mentioned is social security. Ugutu government, they only mention imali grant, but they don't have any budget or plan in nutrition. Yes, there are kids and children out there who are suffering in nutrition, but to government, they only speak about 500. And also isn't while a grant ikhupuka, also nezinto ziyakhupuka itolo, which doesn't make any difference. And then secondly, Usisimbali mentioned Ugutama department, they don't deliver and reports. Like we only hear there's a certain budget allocated for this specific department, but when it comes into e-transparency, they don't have any transparency to report back to us as a country. With this amount of money, what have we done? What are the results? And then thirdly, what stood out for us, we are only borrowing to consume, but not to invest. Hence, we always have it's cool because there are no results. Actually, we only hear that the money has been borrowed, but what has the money done? The money didn't invest. It hasn't been invested on young people, and also it hasn't been invested on businesses. We are always suffering, yet we always have a very huge debt which we don't understand what's EAP. And also another thing that stood out for us is outsourcing of important resources and important work. We are outsourcing things that we can do as a country. For example, if China, in China, they are busy creating, they developed with technology, robots and everything. But as in South Africa, we only been taught about amakwagi, which we don't really understand. University, after university, what am I gonna do? Primary school. Yet, technology is advanced. We are outsourcing things that we can do ourselves. For example, during COVID-19 times, that we hired, they were from Cuba, which means they didn't trust our doctors. Like South Africa, they didn't trust our youth about they can do a difference. And also Cuba, actually, they didn't do any difference, to speak the truth. And last thing, ukuthi i-budget is only based on what the superiors think are the needs, but not what is actually our needs as the communities in South Africa. They don't consult with us and ask ukuthi, what are our needs, but they just budget based on what they think are our needs as our communities in South Africa. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so the idea of a consultative budget and a consultative State of the Nation address has been one of a key campaign that the various civil society organizations have been trying over the past couple of years. And of course, it's not yet at the place where it ought to be, but I think it's important to try and consider. And it was important that you highlighted that as well. I saw another hand, Uba, for at the table of professionals. I'm a professional, so I tell you what. Abaphathi inkampani. Abazosiqasha.
No, I'm not sure about that one. Professionals.
Maybe if you introduce yourself, people will know why I'm saying.
Okay, no, thank you very much. Siyabonga kakhulu. My name is Mboneni Pegiswayo. I'm from the Progressive Professionals Forum.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, my table is well represented, should I say. People in my table come from different organizations. And we have got a common interest as a table. Our common interest about why are we here, or what brought us here, is to get more information and be more knowledgeable and educated on the issues of budget and its purpose. So I think that was the unanimous in the table as an answer to the question that was posed earlier on. We want to appreciate also the information shared by the two speakers. It was also very informative to us, and we believe as a table, we were able to get answers in some of the questions that we had before coming here. Questions such as, does the budget take into account the needs of the communities? The unanimous answer from the table is that the budget does not take into account the need of the people. It is merely historical. What gets budgeted is what was budgeted last year, no matter how COVID, looting, and the floods have changed the lives of the people. But the budget will still want to address what was there, or what was thought to be a service priority before the three events that I've just mentioned happened. So it is really an historical budget. What we advocate as the table is that perhaps it would have been better if the budget was a need-based or activity-based budget. In other words, it must be the budget that talks to the lives and the needs of the people as we grow as South Africa. We were mindful of the fact that, the budget seems to be more addressing what we believe will take this country to the dogs. That is an expression, to the dogs, where you have almost 29 million people living on welfare grants. So that is almost half of the population, which is a disaster. But we know why. If you have 11 or so million people that are every day queuing, that Ulokozana also talked about, queuing for 350 rand, 11 million. And that 11 million people, most of them are young people, people that are supposed to be working and driving the economy, but they are not. So we felt that, maybe historically the budget wants to say, because we're from the apartheid state in the past, so therefore we must be in any kind of a state where people must every day wake up and be recipients of grants, rather than taking them out of grants and make them productive citizens of the country. So that perhaps are some of the shortfalls of the budget. But we also wanted to think that, what is the role of the civil society organization? We now know for a fact that the budget has now passed. There is very likely that us as civil society organizations coming from different sectors that we can do to change the allocation of the budget as it is. We understand and we also note that what Kotongwane presented on that day was a budget or a policy speech. Utesa said that the details of the budget is in that book, which is so voluminous. How many of us have got the time and the energy to read those numbers? So the details are on those numbers. So thanks to those people who are able to dissect the numbers and tell us exactly that what you see allocated there is not what we are going to get at the end of the day. When we say the budget caters for, it gives concession for people who will be able to install solar panels or rebate at the end of the day of the year. Remember that you get a rebate from SARS. How many of us will be able to do that? Given that 29 million of the population are living on welfare grant, will they be able to put up those panels? So it is to us in the table, it will benefit the few who happen to be well-to-do and well-connected, possibly well-connected as well, will be able to cash up from those rebates. But again, what role the organization, civil society can do maybe will be some kind of an M&E, monitoring and evaluation, because we now know that government cannot monitor itself. That is why I was a bit puzzled yesterday when the president had established a new department of M&E. I think it's under Ramahopa. That lady, not the one who's going to ESCOM. There are two Ramahopas now. So we are going. Last time in the apartheid we had porters. Now, so there's a lady who is the second deputy secretary of the ANC, who has been appointed as the minister in the M&E. It's a new department. Now they are going to, in the presidency again. When I say again, people will understand. Now we are saying civil society. That is the area I think that we need to be very forceful on it. Monitor each and every expenditure allocated per priority or per program as civil society, and be able to highlight, any shortcomings or poor performance against those key priorities in the budget. Because only when civil society stands up, like now this TTP is doing, to empower us, so that when we take public platform and speak, we must speak from an informed position, armed with credible knowledge to say, but we have this in your SONA, and this was allocated. Why is it not happening? When we say in eThekwini there's 579 million that has been spent on street lights, when every day we see street poles without lights. So the question is, what happened to that 600 million of the money that was spent? So we need to ask all those questions, but we must have so DDP is giving us the information to be able to confront the people that are supposed to be, lighting our streets, and yet our streets have no lights, but 600 million has been spent. Because that you find in the municipality budget allocation. So lastly, and the last point, program director, before we sit down, we believe that DDP can be a rallying point for many of us small, should I say, organizations who are perhaps unable to not have the muscle to organize sessions like this one. So that when you organize sessions like this, you empower us and we go back to our own organization, to the community that we represent, and further empower them. Because otherwise, this country now needs an activist citizens for us to be able to turn the corner. Other than that, we will forever see people getting richer, few getting richer and richer and richer at the expense of the majority. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think it's important for us to also state the emphasis that we do agree that not only us, but there are other civil society organizations that can become rallying points for the rest of us. There are spaces where Rivonia Circle is able to access that we can't, but we support and we partner with those types of organizations. And then to also announce on the 22nd, 23rd, and 30th of this month, we'll be hosting workshops related to lobbying and advocacy. And we only have space for 30 people. So please, when you do RSVP, make sure that you're not from the same organizations, and don't say you're not from the same organizations and then come from the same organizations, because it's important to give people from different sectors and spaces an opportunity to be a part of those on lobbying and advocacy, specifically at local government level. And so when you come and be a part of that workshop, that's also an opportunity to try and input into the content of some of these forums. When we think about these forums and the ways in which we set them up, one of the things is, one, it's important that they are reflective of the socio-political environment and discussions that are happening broadly, nationally, but also how can we use those spaces as opportunities for gathering more partnerships and bringing other people along into the work of our individual organizations so that we can empower our constituencies in one way or the other. Thank you very much for your input. I'm going to take one last hand for now. There will be a second round of another opportunity to ask questions. I can't see females responding, but I did see Ayabulela starting us off. Cyril, Cyril, you can go for it. Yeah, of course. We can see that there's good parity insofar as numbers there. So we applaud you guys, especially Zandla. Not for that, but just.
Greeting, everybody.
All right.
This is Cyril, social entrepreneur. We spoke about a lot of things with regards to our group. One of the factors that we actually noticed with regards to the education system, where a key point was actually raised. In fact, if you look at the last the budget speech, we're told that 457 billion is in fact located to the basic education and higher institution education. Now, within that, we've seen a decline in terms of students, predominantly who start from for instance, for the last results, metric result that were released, students who actually started in 2011, which was roughly 101,120,000, only 60,000 were able to pass mathematics with 50% and above, which accounts to 8%. Now, if you look at it in terms of South Africa itself, it shows an indication where this country is going. Maths and science, we actually one of the lowest countries in the globe, meaning in terms of innovation, technology, and science, we actually behind. Now, this indicates that also shows about the structure or the economy, how this country is concentrated. We're a service-driven economy. Basically, we don't manufacture, we don't produce anything, which doesn't bode well for the country as a whole, meaning that we will keep on relying on imports from other countries where we should be doing things for ourselves. Now, if you look at the budget speech itself, only 24 billion, in fact, 24 billion and 600 million was actually located for jobs and creation. And we've got like more than 40% of the people unemployed in this country. It's very alarming. And then also there were rumors that were actually circulating that there is going to be a social grant, predominantly universal social grant for people who are not actually employed. For some reason, it seems that was not implemented, meaning people who had lost jobs during pre-COVID still don't have any jobs at this present moment. Even though there was some form of, in the last couple of weeks, I think there was some form of decrease of unemployment amongst the youth, but there's still a large number which are not working in this country. And then with regards to also the inequality, South Africa, everybody knows, has the highest inequality in the whole world. Now, we're not told is any way how we can actually close that gap, make it more competitive, bring more people who are actually coming from disadvantaged backgrounds, be involved in societal organizations, and also in terms of jobs creation. So that's one of the things that we actually were able to have a look at. But also one thing that we've actually noticed is that South Africa doesn't own its central bank, basically. So a country that doesn't own its own central bank doesn't really have its power to drive, create employment, and stimulates economic growth. I think with some of the policies I think the ANC had brought in on the last meeting, they actually indicated that they want to make a means where they can actually own the central bank, because the central bank is actually fundamental for any country to go forward.
Thank you very much, Cyril. So those are the last hands for now. I'd like to offer an opportunity to Tessa and Mbari to maybe just give us the initial feedback. You can have a seat here. Yeah. To give us feedback on maybe based on what's coming out of the room, what are some of the things maybe just to close off that part of to respond, but also to close off this portion of the program. Yeah. Either one of you can go. Tessa said she'll start. Okay, she's been nominated to start. Sure.
Zimbabwe bullies me. You guys don't know how much I'm bullied. So I wanted to address two things in the main. One is the question about grants and comprehensive social protection, because it came up in our group, but it's also come from the floor. So I don't think grants are a bad thing. I just think they're an insufficient thing. And that what we need to be thinking about is comprehensive social protection and a comprehensive social wage, rather than simply a grant-based system that is plugging holes. We have to challenge this government to do more than plug holes. And it's holes that they're creating by not creating better social protection, right? I mean, part of social protection that we don't talk about in this country is the question about hunger. So education is great, health is great, having social services is great, but hunger is a problem, right? So what is the government doing to make sure that people don't starve to death? The goal of a government at its most basic level is to ensure that its citizens can stay alive. That's what social protection is about. Making sure we can stay alive and that we have a base from which to start as people, so that we can then be productive members of our society, socially, politically, and economically. And so when government says that it's doing a child grant, the genesis of the child grant is actually around hunger, is actually around making sure that a child doesn't starve because their parents don't work. But the survey that Brian quoted earlier around, I can't remember what that survey is called, the affordability index, actually shows us that a basket of food for a child is about 800 Rand a month, not 400 Rand a month. We know that there's food schemes in schools because children just, even if they have a working parent, don't have sufficient amounts of food. If we're going to provide social protection that's meant to be addressing hunger, surely we need to do a better job of it than the things we're doing right now. So whatever it is that we do when it comes to social protection, the conversation for me isn't whether or not grants are a good thing or a bad thing. It's whether they're the most appropriate thing and whether they're the most sufficient way to create holistic social protection or not, right? The second thing is the question about budgeting and our participation as citizens in the budgeting process. So Kenya has taken on a very interesting model in the last 5 years or so called devolution. So the ways in which Kenyan government and Kenyan democracy is being structured is to devolve government processes and to devolve government structures. So to not have more centralized government, but have less centralized government. And one of the outcomes of that is the way the budgeting process works. So the 14 months that Mbali talks about in the Kenyan context actually starts in a community, not in a government office. The 14 months starts in communities actually having workshops around what it is that they would like to see in a budget. And the government then working from the point of what communities said they needed, not just what the government and its manifesto from Lutuli House or from, what's the DA's house called? Is it got a name? You don't know anymore, sorry. Sorry, I shouldn't have looked your way. It's not you anymore. Sorry, Sisi. Well, I was trying to make sure I broadened Winnie Mandela House and all of that. But it's not political party manifestos that should be informing budgets. It's actually what communities need. And we must start insisting on that. At the local government level, we actually have more of that opportunity than not, because the IDP process actually by law must have a participatory process, and budgets by law must actually come to communities. Politicians just make sure that it's a tick box exercise that they then pass in people who are going to agree with them. We must disrupt that and make sure we have the say at that level. But we must also insist on it at national level. If it's going to take 14 months to create a budget, we best be a part of that 14 months and in fact initiate it. Thanks.
So mine is very simple, and I went to go speak to this other group, and there were two takeaways that I took from there, which I'm going to, speak to the broader issues. One was that there's a mental health organization there that deals with young people and youth that are mentally disabled or have mental disabilities, and they take them and they take care of them. They're all over Durban, and then they also help them to get jobs. Now, when I found this out, I found it to be very interesting because for many, many years, and I sat on the education portfolio, one of the things that we were told was that the government was having a very hard time about what to do with children that had some mental health challenges or were physically challenged. And we all know that the government just makes a big hoo-ha about how this must be a big part of how people are employed and everything, but they said that they didn't know any organizations that were doing this work, and so that's why they couldn't do it. There are schools in KZN that are designated for children who have mental disabilities and physical disabilities that are standing unfinished because one, it's not really a priority, but two, it's almost a feeling as though Bazo went on after that. This is our government. And so imagine my surprise to find that not only is there an organization right here in Durban, but it's been doing this work anyway. And so I want to say what I was saying there is very, very critical. If civil society is not going to take the ambition of going to these kinds of committees and making sure that their voices are heard, there's no way that you are going to be included in the budget. If someone had told me that this organization existed, I would have been able to, as somebody who was on that committee, to say, you have to allocate money, you have to prioritize these things because you're lying. Here's an organization that is doing it without the support of government. How much more could they be doing for these children and for these youth if they actually had the support of government? Similarly, one of the things that we're talking about here, and this is what I think, if possible, we should try and get as our action plan from this group today, is not just to talk about all the issues, because we know that there's many issues. What do we do going forward? And I think one of the things that we must actually start pressing on, and this came from one of the gentlemen in that group, is people don't even know when the dates of committees are. People also don't often know when the dates of councils are until they've happened or until they're happening. And so it's also going to be difficult for you to go to these meetings if you don't know where they are. So maybe the simple action step that you all take going forward, just one thing that you need to do, is find out when the committee that is relevant to your organization actually meets. What are the meeting dates for the next 6 months? So that you're not going to be waiting for government to come to you. You can go proactively and say, I know that they're meeting on this day, eThekwini at City Hall, and make sure that you are there to actually hear what is going to be happening, what is going to be the budget, what is going to be allocated, and similarly for the province. And I know that it seems like something simple, but I think it gets us into the mindset of not talking so much. It's time for action now. And no one's going to be helped by us all lamenting and analyzing the issues. The issues are there, we know them. They haven't even changed, which is why we see no movement. It's now about time about what we're actually going to do. And I think we need to come up with at least a tick box of 10 to 15 things that need to be done. But even if we don't finish and exhaust coming up with that today, the very first simple thing is actually find out when these committees are actually meeting. And so for me, that was a big takeaway of what the discussions are that we've been having, is that we can have these discussions as much as we like, but what is the action? What's the next step? What are you going to do? Otherwise, you're never going to influence the kind of change. We're never going to see anything changing.
Yeah. Thank you very much to both Mbali and Tessa for your inputs, and thank you to the tables who've contributed so far. I'd like to ask with the greatest sort of humility that we're going to have a working tea. What a working tea is, you grab whatever it is that you're going to eat and drink and come back and sit immediately, okay? Because load shedding is going to affect one of our speakers online. So if we aren't back in time, we might lose out on the content that the speaker might have. So also there is lunch at the end of the program. So when you grab something to eat now, don't think that you're eating for lunch as well, okay? Be considerate of the next person is what I'm saying. So grab something to eat and come back quickly, please. So at the most, we have 10 minutes. So at 2:45, we're going to start again with the next portion of the program. At 2:45, we're going to start again with the next portion of the program. Bab, Ninjan. Testing 1, 2. All right, colleagues. I think other colleagues will join us as we continue. Due to time, we'll commence with the next portion of the program. So we've been speaking broadly about the national priorities as it relates to the budget suite and SONA. And so what we're going to do now is try to hone in a bit in terms of the alignment between what the national budget speech was speaking about, what the State of the Nation address as delivered by Cyril Ramaphosa, and how it aligns with our provincial address. State of the Province address, I think, was made about a week or two ago by the Premier of the province. And we're going to have with us a political analyst and scholar. Of course, Lokokwe Scholar is going to do a bit more of that. This year, I'm putting pressure on him. Is going to be part of the PhD gang soon. So Tobani Zigalala is going to be giving us his view of how the KZN SOPA aligns with both of those instruments and how he feels about just at an initial glance. We're going to mic him up whilst we wait for the other two colleagues. We're going to mic him up quite quickly. Sorry, 1 second. One of you, if I may borrow your mics. Yeah. We go thinking, hey, I know that's your maiden son. This one. Huh? You can mic them up just now, but let's try with them first. On. Yeah. Wait, yeah. All right, so we're going to give Tobani a round of applause. He's going to speak to us about the KZN SOPA and its alignment with SONA, as well as the budget speech and his sort of views of the political imperatives for the province. Can we give him a round of applause?
Sanibona. Ngithemba ukuthi siyezwana. Kuyakhuluma lokho.
Yebo, kuyakhuluma impela.
Oh, siyabonga. Sanibona. Igama lami nguThobani ngwakaZikalala. Ngukhuzeni. Khona ngathi siyawina kulezi insuku, ngathi khamba kahle. Because isikhathi asinaso, so we don't have enough time. Those who know me know that I love to extend a lot and explain a few things. Isikhathi eside ogcina sekudla isikhathi sabantu abasendlini. And because also before me, capable speakers have spoken, and at least I help us understand ikakhulukazi izinto lezi ezizincukatha nemininingwane as pertaining to the very big things esikhuluma ngazo namhlanje. Yangithokozisa ukuthi umbali does mention ukuthi, because now I think ngizodlula lapho namhlanje abanye abantu ubuso bambakazela kwezinye izinto. I've spent more than 15 years as a political activist. Been in politics for half my life. Everything that I know is political. And I've always said to young people like myself that any young person in particular, but any person generally, who claims that they are not political, they are not into politics, is saying a very problematic thing. Because in ourselves as people, as we live in a politically organized society, what in political science we'll call a polity, we are political beings. Our existence and our moving in the world is in itself political. So whilst we may have problems with party political formations and party politics and its organizational problems, it does not mean that in our living of such, we cease to become political beings, right? And I think I thought I must get through past that first, because I hear this a lot every time, especially young people. I hate politics. I don't want to be in politics. Being in politics, and I've said this before, Mbali, I think, in some platform of DDP, that being in politics, no, it was not this platform, it was another platform, where I said politics is not ANC, DA, EFF. Politics is the science of power and authority. It is for us who are political science students, when we go to class each and every day, we are concerned about how power is derived, how the authority thereof is exercised in making sure that public services and goods are delivered to the citizens or residents of particular areas. This is what we are concerned about. Now, even if we study international relations, we are concerned about power and authority. And of course, we can go to the legitimacy of such power and all those things, but this is what we're concerned about. So any person who claims they're not political, it's either they are too political to realize that they are political, or they themselves have not understood what politics is. Civil society is part of politics. And any civil society person who claims to not be interested in politics is not in civil society. Right? So I thought maybe let's get through past that, Mbali. Secondly, I think I'm very happy because even though we may be in the same age range, Nabombali and Tessa and them, I think I'm the youngest. I may look a bit older. I may look a bit older, but I think I'm the youngest. Of course, maybe later we may have a debate about who's older and who's younger, but I think I'm the youngest. Of course, I look older and get inake ezinye izinto ezenza kuzona ezethu ke bayathanda ukuziveza abanye abantu ukuthi yibona abaphethe lezi. I've wasted a lot of your time with these things I've just been saying. The last thing I'm going to say before I get into some of the things I'm going to say is that I'm not going to get into the specifics, right? And for particular reasons, because if we got into the specifics, we'd have to be here the whole day, right? As Tessa was saying, some of these things that we're sitting here to discuss, their documents are quite thick. I can't waste your time, as Tessa was saying, on 5-10 pages of the speech in front of us. Of course, with Sopage, it was 44 pages this year, it was 41 pages last year, a bit thicker. Of course, with some of the speeches, you'll find 10 to 12 pages. But if you look at the document itself from which these speeches are derived, it's it's very big. And then it means if we were to sit here and really trash through these issues, we'll spend a lot of time in this room. So what I'm going to do, and I'm sorry, Brian, that I'm going to do this, but what I'm going to do is to look at what the priorities are of government and then give you a bit of my comments and analysis in terms of where I think government is thinking wrong in some of the issues it claims to be dealing with. So mine is just a two-pronged job. I'm going to tell you that in 2022, the then premier of the province, not going to say his surname for other reasons, but Premier Sihle, Premier Sihle, his surname is very nice surname, is from Endwetwe. So Premier Sihle Zigalala said to us that the priorities of the KZN government are basic services, job creation, growing the economy, growing the SMEs and cooperatives, education, skills and development, education and skills development, I meant, the building of a peaceful province and the building of a caring and corrupt-free or incorruptible government. This is what was said in 2022. Of course, we know many events happened after that. In 2023, we have a new premier, Unkosikazi Unomusa Dube Ngube. And again, if you go through the document of their speeches, the priorities are in front. I don't want to make accusations, right? But you must go and read these documents and how they look and where things are placed and all those things. It says a lot about our government. But the priorities are almost the same. save for just one additional priority on human settlement and sustainable and the building of sustainable livelihoods. So the priorities of government at least have stayed the same and stayed constant. As I said, I don't want to make accusations, but if I were to make some accusations, having gone through some of the pages in these two statements, I would say these statements are exactly the same. Of course, we can have then a discussion with those who are able to analyze text and all those things in whether these are the same. But I say, on face value, and in some of the pages, this document is written the same way. The way it's designed is the same thing. It says something about our government. One can say, because the issues are the same, the approach is going to be the same, therefore there's no need to write new speeches. One will say that. But someone like me, I'm not very, very positive sometimes about this country, will say it displays laziness on the part of government. When you don't even change the design, you know, I can show, but my phone is too far. I was going to show you. The design of the document is exactly the same. As I say to you, the only difference I saw is that the priorities were 8 last year, they are 9 this year. But it's the same. Of course, there is the politicians and government. And then there's the state of the province as seen, perceived by us who are not in government. For example, when government speaks of a building of a peaceful province, and last year we were at a certain level in terms of conflict, murder of particular leaders in the province, and this year it seems to have risen. And government says what, Mbali? Government says we are going to have a commission of some sort to investigate the murder of councillors, headmen, Izinduna, Namakosi, and whatnot. I'm like, how long has this been happening in this province? We're still going into a commission. If we go to a commission, then what's the role of criminal intelligence in the province and SAPS? That's my question. Unfortunately enough, I was able to attend that SOPA. And for me, that's the first thing that came to mind. I was like, I heard Isilo Samabanda saying this thing the day before, and I understood from his part. He's not in government, but those in government must speak a language that says to us they understand the functions of government. When you have a police department in the province, when you have a police department such as ours, which has crime intelligence, national intervention units, and the like, and many of these units inside, you tell me the only thing you can do to build a peaceful province, in particular in regards to the deaths in the political space, is go to a commission? Maybe us and government do not live in the same area. Let's look at another issue. Last year it was there, this year it has risen quite significantly. The conflict between e-hailing drivers, the taxi industry, those who pick up what is called scholar transport, and quite a bit funny, of course, and even those of you who have cars. It's a nice thing of conflict, right? At all. But it's a priority for them to have a peaceful province. I'm concerned because my point is, let's look at the things that me and you face each and every day. Maybe sometimes, of course, in other days, I try to go to these big things, but today I want to, at least on these two issues, to look at the things that we face, to say, if government claims that this province must be peaceful and there's conflict each and every day in that gets reported on Facebook and the likes, and government has had no intervention, whatsoever. The MEC of Transport has said nothing. By the way, the MEC of Transport is guardian in this space. He's the one who's supposed to tell us what's government going to do when the taxi industry seems to have turned themselves to traffic police, when the e-hailing drivers seem to not be regulated as much as other public transport services are regulated. What's going to happen, right? Another thing is government seems to have not been ready by the shifts that happen in the world. For example, if you look at in a different industry, if you look at video streaming, filming, and whatnot with Netflix, we don't know how to regulate that space. But the world has been, Netflix, they don't arrive yesterday in the world, but we didn't do anything about it. Now Netflix is here, we don't know what to do. How do we regulate? SAPC apparently is saying, going to charge you license fees. You know, now SAPC has been failing to collect licenses on your TVs. Now they want to charge you for your phones and laptops. You know, in this country we dream too much, we dream too big. You know, we fail to do simple things and want to do complicated things. It's like Tessa. I always hear a lot of these politicians. They stand on podium and they say, "You're saying the fourth industrial revolution, we must do what? You know, with the introduction of Zoom." I'm like, eh? Oh, fourth industrial revolution, Zoom. That's what you can think about. Virtual meetings. You know, it's a problem we face in this world. You've got politicians who seem, they catch any buzzword that's out there because it's trending, everyone says it, but they don't seem to know what these things are. And I repeat this thing about the fourth industrial revolution a lot because it concerns me that those who lead our government, most of them do not know, do not understand what the fourth industrial revolution is. The fourth industrial revolution is not the discovery of the computer and laptop. It's not virtual meetings. Because virtual meetings are third industrial revolution things, information technology, the discovery of information technology. It's something we discovered a long time ago. We are now dealing with artificial intelligence, right? The digital space, the bringing together of the satellite world and the physical world to make production processes happen a bit faster. That's where we are. And fourth industrial revolutions, when they industrial revolutions when they happen, this is the concern. This is the question we must always ask. Every time industrial revolution happens, those who are researching, the question they want to answer is how can we make production better? And the discovery of such technologies that are going to make production better is an industrial revolution, right? Maybe in layman terms. Of course, it's very complicated than that. But I wanted to pass there also. Let's go to other issues before I sit down, because I've spoken about the issues in public transport. You know, where I stay, I look at the railroad there. When I was growing up in Durban, it was very shiny, you know. You know those things, I don't know what they're called in English. I think it's the rail itself, ne? Ujantshi, westimela, ne? To put it in our language, it's a way that I understand. Ujantshi, ne? Ujantshi mawusebenza. Uyacwebezela, ne? Okusho ukuthi izitimela ziyahamba. Akunatshana eduze kubhizi. Manje la ngihlala ngakhona ujantshi wesitimela uma ngime endlini nje ewindini ngiyawubona yabo. Lapha ngakomngeni yabo. Kunokhula ujantshi wakhona urastile yabo, so that the rail itself is, which shows one, the trains are not moving as much as they used to be. You have a situation because of the moving of trains, the taxis and other industries are facing an influx. There's a lot, and of course, our people with the amount of wages that they earn, they cannot, some of them, afford to take taxis and other modes of transport. But also the problem in South Africa is that the public transport infrastructure program or industry is not regulated properly, it's not structured properly. In Durban in particular, they've been building Go Durban, I don't know for how many years. Dumsani Makhaya Highway is always being built. There's always something happening. I saw now they've moved to areas like Phoenix and others. I don't know when those buses are going to move. You remember when they started building? I remember Johannesburg was building its rapid transport network, Rea Vaya, ne? And Rea Vaya buses were working in 2010, ne? And we started building maybe a year after that, ne? It's 2023, no buses moving. I don't even know, some buses were bought, I don't even know where they are. We laugh, but it shows also some of the point I want to raise. That because of the age that we are in, every time government raises issues and issues to be dealt with and programs that they're going to implement, every time they think private sector, I mean, the capacity of government is so eroded that government cannot be able to patch up potholes on its own. Government is so, the erosion of government capacity means that government cannot even buy toilet papers for themselves. They can't buy pens. They can't buy tea things for the office. Not like their tea, like coffee, some rooibos here, some coffee there, some what there, just tea for the office. For them, they can't. They must issue a request for quotation. Someone must tender their quotation and must go buy. And they must go buy where? They must go buy at the supermarket where me and you buy, but they then charge 50% or 100% more. It's sometimes more than 300%. Because government's capacity has been eroded so much. Also, this must not be seen as an attack on the private sector, which has a very important role to play in terms of the development of this country. But it cannot be that everything that government wants to do is shifted to the public sector. There's this idea, Jomane, I always hear it. I have a problem with it, but I always hear it. It sounds very good. Government must create a conducive environment, business, what, such things. They're nice when you hear them. The problem I have with this is that if, like, for example, the premier of the province was saying we must attract investments, we must open our provinces up, all I'm saying is, so government is concerned about the development of its citizens. But for the development of its citizens, government is saying, all I will do is build roads, cut a bit of tariffs here and in there, give you electricity, and I will stand on the side as you develop my community. I will be a referee in a game I'm supposed to be playing. By the way, this is said when the state president, and this is concurred by the premier of the province, that we are trying to build a capable developmental state. I don't know which political science these people are studying, but the one that I studied, and I've been trying to study for so long, does not speak of a developmental state which has government as a hands-free entity. In fact, in a developmental state, the government is at the center, the government is playing a very critical and central role, unless you want to build a different type of state. You know, I said the other day to some of my friends, I think we're in the final phases of GEAR. And why I say that? One of the things that GEAR taught us was that there's going to be a prioritization of the growth of the economy. But also what we learned during the GEAR years was that that did not really translate into the development, transformation of lives and of communities and the creation of massive permanent jobs. Where we are today, it seems we are so concerned about growing the economy, putting so much money in it, growing the production, but that sometimes does not translate really to real jobs being created. I know, I think I read in some in part of the statement by the premier, where he spoke about, I think about 10,000 jobs. It's nice, man, when we start becoming realistic, you know, start becoming realistic. We don't speak about 1 million jobs. We speak about 5,000 yana, 10,000 yana jobs, and we leave it there. And we fail to create 10,000 jobs. It's fine. The next year, at least, we have a realistic yana dream. We speak of 10,000 jobs. For me, it's always nice that way. Instead of a government that says, I'm going to create 1 million jobs. And then the very same government, through its state president, and this is concurred sometimes through its premiers, we don't have a duty to create jobs. We can't do anything to create jobs. But it's the same government which claims we're going to create jobs. Now, this government says we're going to create jobs, we're going to open the economy, we're going to bring investment. But no, It's not our duty that these jobs are created. We just promise them because our friends who give us money and are investing said they are going to put in so much money. And if we change some of our policies, they're going to create jobs. We don't know how they are going to do it, but we like it. We like how it sounds. So we're going to tell it to you also. But when it doesn't happen, please don't blame us because we don't have a duty to create jobs for you. This is what they are saying to you every day. But they are wrong. This you must know. They are wrong, especially when they continue to call themselves a developmental state. I'm going to try and drum this in. If they continue to call themselves a developmental state, they are wrong if they say it's not their duty to make sure that jobs are created. This country, someone can come from wherever in the world and say they have $100 million, they are going to invest in this economy. And then they tell us, if you want me to invest, decrease my electricity rate, decrease this, and make sure that you curtail wages of the people, increase that, then I'm going to bring my money. Our government agrees. 10 years later, we are the ones who are crying. Oh, they are taking all the money away from our country. Of course, you allowed them. I was saying in another paper I was trying to write that the problem of our economy, especially the one in KwaZulu-Natal and other provinces, is that it's an extractivist or an extraction-based economy. What I mean by this is that our economy, unfortunately, does not enter, those who studied economics will know, does not enter into the secondary and tertiary industries. It remains in the primary industries. What I mean by that is that each and every day, what we are concerned about is the extraction of natural resources. And those resources are not developed to be able to become secondary products and be able to be part of the tertiary industry. What it means is that our jobs are largely based on the primary sector. This is why we've got 400,000 miners. And when you look at how many engineers we are employing, the numbers are staggering. It's like, and then at some time we had jeeps, all right? I'm just trying to take you back some of the things that we have said. I'm sorry if I'm boring you, but I'm going to finish now. In GIPSA, we said we want priority skills, right? Joint initiative on priority skills acquisition. I think we got something wrong with that type of thinking. And some of you here are going to, can disagree with me. In discourse, we say all ideas in the fire. A friend of mine writes in his book, the idea of the fallacy or the myth of skills deficit in South Africa. And I'm going to say it here. This idea that people in this country are unemployed because there is no skills is a lie. It's a lie because when you have so many doctors who are unplaced, when you have so many engineers who are unemployed, then the problem cannot be skills. The problem is how you have structured your economy in such a way that your economy is not able to absorb different skills at different levels of its economy. Your problem is that you have structured your economy in such a way that it is profit-driven, which means those in the private sector, they are merely concerned about maximizing profits and not community development and economic development of the country. If we don't understand this, I think we have a problem. I have no problem with business people. I love some of them. Some of them support the work that we do in communities and all those things. Some of them feed our families and all those things. But my biggest disagreement with them is that in their approach of solving community issues, they see profits. And everything that needs to be done is how much money can we make out of it. And unfortunately, in terms of their thinking, they've influenced even those that they found in the civil society. So people have ceased to be human beings, but they've become numbers, data, clients, all these things that you are demanded that you need to do if you want money. I'm sorry to go there. Let me close here. Njomane, I think I've spoken on some of the things I wanted to speak about, but the last 2 points I wanted to go into, because we touch on the issues of foreign investment. I want to go to this idea of integrated development and maybe close that off with something on opposition parties. I wouldn't be a political commentator worth his salt if I don't touch on some of the politics of this country. There's a problem in this country. We speak of integrated development that is not really integrated. And I think Umbali touched on that in one way or another. There's a road that needs to be built. It must be built on the boundary of the municipality in a particular ward, but the municipality does not have the money to build this road. So this money must be asked for in the MIG, Municipality Infrastructure Grant, so that the road must be built. But this road ends up not being built properly because all these people are not speaking to each other on a daily basis. It's a matter of request, approval, and all those things. And on the very same way, the community on which the road is being built on is not really worried about the road, right? But they are worried about the bridge that must cross Utugela River because their kids are drowning there. But this development is in such a way that, I hope you're following where I'm going. And this development, as it happens, a particular private company is coming from Engutu to build a bridge, a road in Watuguza, and it's coming with its own workers and its own specialists to build here and employs couple few nyana laborers. But when they leave, these laborers, general laborers, will not have had any skills that has been transferred to them. How is that integrated development? I don't know if we hear each other. My point is this: if integrated development is supposed to happen, it must happen in such a way that all the departments in South Africa, every time a project is supposed to be built, we must know. For example, Department of Employment and Labor must be able to ask Public Works. Public Works, we are spending 300 million here building houses. How many people are going to be employed? How many people are going to be trained? You know? Critical questions, so that we can be able to monitor, not this thing of opening a Department of Monitoring and Evaluation, because it was done in the past. I think I disagree with it even now. Every department must have its own unit of monitoring. But I'm saying to you, the money that we spend must be able to impact all areas of our lives at one go. When we come and we build 1,000 houses, every department must be able to say, okay, this is a new settlement being built. Are we going to need a school? Are we going to need a clinic? Are we going to need a road? Are we going to need people being trained so that they get skills out of this project? But what happens in this country is that 300 million gets spent. No training done. Some private company was paid the money. They are gone. The houses are falling apart after that, and no one knows what happened. And some areas in staying where I was born, there are houses that are standing, and that no one knows why they are not completed, and no one can give answers because no one cares and no one is working with anyone. Everyone is just doing their own job. Last point. I have a problem with opposition parties these days.
Yeah.
And it's good. Me and you, Mbali, we of course, you were in parliament, I was on the streets, but I think you get my point. You get my point. I have a problem with opposition parties, and I think you touched on this. This idea that opposition parties are going to be voted for, go to parliament, clap hands, sleep on the back benches, after 5 years, come back to us and ask for our vote must stop. I'm going here. While we hold the governing party accountable, which is something we must do, opposition parties need to be held accountable. They must tell us in 5 years in parliament, what have they done? Because the constitution allows them to do so much. What have they done? Have they gone to ESCOM? Do they know what's happening at ESCOM? When Andre Tereta arrives in parliament, what do they say to him? Outside of the cameras, what is happening? Of course, I'm not speaking, holding someone accountable is not that jumping up and down people do when there's a State of the Nation address. In fact, the State of the Nation address must be shut down. I want to tell you, the State of the Nation address in its current form must go. It has become a fashion show for people to show us how well our money is making them dress. How well, what nice champagne they can eat. With our money. With our money. Oh, no. So I'm saying opposition parties must be held accountable. Of course, some opposition parties are doing very well in parliament. Some of them don't even have numbers. Some of them are 1 or 2 there, but you can see when these people are doing real serious work. Some of them are many. When you ask them, what are you doing here? They don't know. They don't know. They take nice pictures. They go to parliament, they eat, they sleep, they burn some benches, and then after 5 years, vote for us, the ANC is messing up. Okay, the ANC is messing up. What have you done with regards to what you sold to us and the mandate we gave to you? What have you done in parliament in making sure that what you believe in is at least part of the conversation in parliament? Some of them, you know, some of them are doing nothing. Some of them you don't even know they're in parliament, those people, you know? And we are spending money, keeping them afloat. We are paying their MPs, we are paying their leaders. And then we have a State of the Nation address, we spend millions. I know in KwaZulu-Natal, we spent about 3.7 million for that thing that happened there at the Oval Cricket Stadium. I didn't see 3.7 million. I know that it was spent, I didn't see it. But all I was saying in closing is that, of course, I didn't go to the specificities, right? The specifics. And I thought I mustn't do that because I believe all of us here, besides the fact that previous speakers have spoken to that, but all of us here at least know what the government is saying to us. But all I was saying is that there needs to be a shift in thinking in government in terms of what needs to be done. But on the other hand, there must be a shift in thinking from us who are citizens of this country to make sure that things happen the way they must happen. But and part of that is us stopping this idea that we are not in politics.
All right, thank you very much, Zikalala, for concluding in 20 minutes. We really appreciate, of course, no, it's understandable. We appreciate your input. So now we're joined by Crystal Duncan Williams, who is the project lead for Youth Capital, and she's going to be speaking to us specifically around the alignment of all of these things as it relates to young people, a key demographic that seems to be talked about, that seems sometimes to be used as voting fodder, that is part of some leagues here and there in some institutions, currently marching for rights and access to education, but doesn't seem to be prioritized insofar as the policy development of this country. To what extent does she and her organization feel that the budget speech and SONA have impacted that demographic of people? She did apologize. Unfortunately, she won't be able to linger around for the question and answer session. So we'll try as much as possible to follow up with her in other settings. But we do appreciate your time, Crystal, and we look forward to what you have to present to us. If you can give her a round of applause. We're clapping for you, even if you can't hear us.
I can hear you guys. I can hear you. I hope you can hear me. And I know it's coming to the end of your morning and it's before lunchtime. So I hope my slides will wake you up a little bit. Thanks so much, Brian, for that introduction. And yeah, our thoughts and my thoughts around the budget and its implications on SONA, or how disconnected those things were. So I'm going to touch on a few things, and I will stick to time. So did the SONA and budget speech really align? What are we doing what we're doing is not working, and I'm going to show you the numbers to prove that, even though I don't think I have to convince anybody. What are the realities that young people face? Just to speak a little bit about that cost of job seeking that Brian spoke about right at the beginning of the day today, and what we're calling for at Youth Capital from the budget. Maybe next year. We did try making a submission, but they sent us to the Appropriations Committee in July. So we're on it. So just for anybody who doesn't know, this is Youth Capital's action plan. I always like to show it at the start of any presentation because it really anchors all of our work. We believe key to addressing the youth unemployment crisis is to first acknowledge that young people are not just struggling to find a job the day they start looking for work, that they're on a journey from places of learning to places of earning. And we need to acknowledge that journey and all the systemic roadblocks that get in their way on that journey. And unless we look at all those roadblocks cohesively and address all of those key points, we'll continue to fail the majority of young South Africans in our quest to allow them to thrive and be economically productive, which is the focus of Youth Capital's work. So the main reflections from the budget for us, one, youth or young people was not mentioned once in the budget. And I enjoyed Tessa's presentation earlier. And obviously we acknowledge that not everything can be spoken about in the budget. That's what the review is for. But I think it was interesting that in every single SONA that I've listened to since doing this work, which is the last 5 years, you know, the SONA always makes mention of youth. And it did this year, not as much as before, but it did. But the budget didn't make one, like if you control F, you will not find the word youth or young people in the budget speech. And I think that's really kind of speaks to, you know, as this working, it's a political statement, it speaks to where the current government's focus is. And I think it's shifting away from youth unemployment, and we need to be worried about that, which leads me to my second point, you know, that oh, I don't want to do that, the presidential employment stimulus and the PYI, which are obviously big flagship projects of the presidency, we know that it only has secure funding until March 2024. Beyond that, we're not really sure what's going to happen. What everybody's saying is that it's going to be divvied up across different departments, which is how it's been in the past. You know, if you look at something like EPWP, the Expanded Public Works Program, we know that that money gets taken from various municipality budgets, and when it's piecemeal like that, it's difficult to account for how money is spent, and it's difficult to check the impact of that spending. And so I personally believe it's really valuable to have a specific budget to a particular program and intervention rather than divvying it up across different departments and municipalities. And so that's of concern to us. The third reflection is that we know that infrastructure is key, and I think it's really linked to, you know, the barriers that young people face when they're trying to find ways to earn an income. And we've heard about infrastructure every single budget. It feels like they're saying the same things over and over, and I feel like I have deja vu. And it doesn't feel like there's enough momentum on that. And I think we felt the same this year. The president, which I found interesting, mentioned in the informal sector for, I'm pretty sure, the first time ever. He always makes mention of small business, but he's never specifically mentioned the informal sector. And he did this year, and that was really encouraging to me, because I'm going to go into our latest piece of research looking at small and medium businesses, which are both formal and informal. And we really think if we're talking about job creation, or even just learning the ropes of how to run your own business for young people, then obviously small businesses where we need to start. And so what kind of environment the government and the budget creates for those small businesses to thrive is really important. And I was really discouraged that it wasn't mentioned in the budget speech. And ultimately, our main takeaway is that the current kind of macroeconomic approach, this austerity budget, this approach by the government is not going to lead to GDP growth, which ultimately is what we need to create jobs. And so overall, we were unimpressed by the budget, which I'm sure many people are not surprised by. And so at the end of last year, we ran a survey with small and medium businesses, both focus groups and online survey, and our report is called Bridge the Gap. And Brian can share these slides with you, but you can also find it on our website. And we spoke to nearly 100 small businesses, which spoke about their challenges of hiring and retaining young employees and first-time job seekers. And generally, there seems to be a mismatch between young people entering the world of work and employers hiring them. So these two sides of the coin just aren't speaking to each other. And so much of government programs and so much of government money, and I know Tessa has done the crunch the numbers on this, so much money onto the supply side, right? Young people, the supply side, and so little focus on the demand. Why are we pipelining young people into nothing, or pipelining them into a short-term opportunity that doesn't change the overall trajectory? What is going wrong? And I think a big part of that is not speaking to the demand side enough, and this is what we're attempting to do at Youth Capital. And to the budget speech. So we know that the employment tax incentive has now been renewed until 2029. And this is problematic because the current incentives aren't working. Look at these numbers. They're really shocking. They're even worse than I thought they were going to be honest. Less than half, so 3 in 10 at best, are making use of things like Triple BE, which is the YES program, CETA funding to upskill their staff, YES, employment tax incentive. Only 1 in 10 of the businesses we spoke to. Now, I know that it's not statistically representative sampling. It's whoever answered the survey. It's through our networks. But it's problematic that we're spending so much money, 7 billion rand alone in the past year on the employment tax incentive. And what are we really getting for that? No research can conclusively show us that it's creating jobs that wouldn't have been there otherwise. And I think, again, this is a government that, every budget we're sticking to the same recipe, and this recipe is one of failure, right? Our cake is flopping and we're not changing the recipe and the ingredients. Why? So we know that young people make up half of the working age population, but the latest results, we're busy concluding an analysis with Duma now, and that report should be out in the next 2 months or so. What we're seeing from this report that Duma is kind of crunching some numbers for us is that even though half of the working age population is young, under the age of 35, only 34% of them make up the number of employed people. And so what this means is that the absorption rate, so how many people who are able to work and of working age are being absorbed by the labor market. If we break all these numbers down on the slide, for every 3 in 10 young people who are able and willing to work, only 3 in 10 of them are actually working and being absorbed by the economy. Why is that? We're creating jobs, but the truth of it is, if you look at the last 10 years or so, the analysis we're doing are showing that the jobs we're creating are not going to young people. And we are busy unpacking what that means. But it means that what we are doing is not working to address the challenge that we face. We spoke about the infrastructure and why I mentioned it and why it's of concern for us and our constituency and our advocacy approach is, this stat that 8 in 10 young people, we did it last year, we're going to be running the survey again towards the middle of this year with new numbers coming out in the 3rd quarter of this year, so you can look out for it. 8 in 10 young people are saying they have to choose between looking for work and buying food because transport is so expensive. I heard the previous speaking about the cost of transport, and it's ridiculous of the amount of money young people are spending 1,000 rand on average just to look for work. Where must you find that money if you don't have any income? And so how can you look for work, even if there are jobs, when that's the reality? We speak about data and internet connectivity, all made worse by load shedding. These are just infrastructure challenges that we have had for years, that we've heard governments speak about fixing for years. And yet we continue to have young people bear the brunt of the failure of government to address these infrastructure challenges. So our call off the back of the budget and SONA is that we need a different macroeconomic policy framework with a growth target of 6%. We need a GDP growth target of 6%, and that kind of economic environment will create more jobs, we think, than the current approach. And our other kind of bold statement is to say ETI is not working. We spent all the 7 billion, as I said, in 1 year alone. Let's redirect that to have one institute that manages public works programs, the Basic Education Employment Initiative, Presidential Employment Stimulus, all of these short-term work opportunities to be managed under one institution with a set wage, so you don't have people program jumping, which happens because we understand people want to go wherever they can make the most money, which is understandable, where the training and skills, is standardized, and there's a monitoring and evaluation framework, and we can hold an entity accountable for all of these different programs instead of us having to jump between different departments or task teams to figure out what is, our return on investment for these short-term work opportunities. And so that is it from me. I've got to jump off at 1 o'clock, so I can stick around till then. But otherwise, feel free to pop me an email if you have any questions. Thanks so much, Brian.
I was going to say something controversial, but I'm still going to say it anyways. She works with young people. She's clear, concise, and to the point. You see, that's what young people want. Can you give her a round of applause? So I'm going to offer an opportunity for you to ask questions directly to Crystal and Tobani as it relates to their presentations. We don't, unfortunately, have the time to go and have discussions at the table first. But so if anyone feels moved you're able to just pick up your hand and we'll address it as it is. Anyone with any questions or comments for either Utobani or Crystal? Yes, sir. If you can come to the mic, please. I-TV izokubona ngazi ngimbomtshelile umqashi ukuthi ula.
Sanibonani, unkosikazi kaMpungoselo, known as Uzi. Well, mini comment yami will go to IPARA. That's Nonsensical Lion Utoban Ukuzeni. Well, I think especially at transport, that's where my comment will be on, because for me, I think what we see and what is happening, it's something that is planned by actually the governing party. I mean, Bulali Timela and bringing more trucks on the road. I mean, we saw what happened yesterday on our M14 or 41 or
41, M41 going to the M41. Yeah.
And again, it's a truck involved, and we've been hearing and seeing this truck things and out the railway business, so that they can have all these tender things that is happening in the country. So it is government. I don't know how we can intervene as civil society on that, because we know it's government planning to kill the trains so that they can have more trucks on the road for whatever reason that they have in their business. So the issue is on transport, especially on taxis, as a taxi, because now when you wake up, usually I used to wake up and find the shorter line on the taxi stop so that I can reach at work on time. But now I have to wake up an hour earlier, but still find, like today maybe I was number 37. And it's not that the taxis are not working. We are just too much. And the taxis and the buses cannot take us, because now there are train loads that are also part of the taxi, which now becomes, long. So we come later to works. Abakash don't understand that, because some of them have cars. So when we come, they were like, hey, but you were supposed to wake up, but you did wake up. Just that we have a lot of traffic on the road. So that my comment is, I don't know how we can actually intervene on that as civil society. I would really love to even lead that much if we have to. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the absence of a public transport infrastructure forces us to go to private cars. Private cars come with their own costs, all of that sort of stuff. There's costs. People waiting in queues is a cost of the economy, because it means they're not productive in the spaces where they ought to be productive, but they also don't have the same level of energy in the spaces where when they get to work. You're already tired by the time you get. So on the public transport, why are they hogging the space so much? Because Mbali is also a taxi owner, guys. Sometimes she's there driving the Quantum herself. No, serious, guys. It's true. So they must tell us why, because clearly there's not enough capacity, or at least we must be missing something. They must let us know why they want to take kids public transport away and all of that sort of stuff. But not even shy for some of these things. I was going to say to something you said earlier, Tobani, about the commission on violence. I thought we went over that already. From 2011 to 2015, there was a Morana commission. There's a whole report that's already been drafted. So I was also privileged enough to be at the state of the. I was in the US during the time of the State of the Union address, which is their sort of State of the Nation, and I didn't see that pageantry that happens in our State of the Nation address. The whole idea of posing. People went to work. People were serious, and even though they were Americans about it, they went to work, and they went to work and they did what they had to do. It wasn't any of this pageantry. So I'm interested to understand what's so special about our context in the political space that it has to be about the pageantry and less about the participation. So I'm going to ask Auntie Jenny, then Paul. I don't know if I missed another hand somewhere at the front. Big is the Enzo for now. and then missing is Agwanaba. Yeah, those 4 hands. And for Crystal's sake, if there's a direct question to Crystal, let's ask it early so that she can be able to respond before she heads off to her next appointment. Yes,
Okay,
Auntie Jenny.
mine is just a comment on behalf of civil society. My name is Jenny. I work in Marion Ridge. I think at the outset, we want to say, as civil society, we really fatigued. We doing the most, you know. It's education. We filling all these gaps. We are tired, guys, you know. And I want to come back to the point that the previous speaker made about where the fudge are the opposition parties. We know the ruling party is messing up. We're pissed off with them. You know, we're ready to throw them under the bus. But where are the other people who have the resources, the knowledge, and who we are holding up, you know? And even as we see the dilemma, the other dilemma that they present for us is how undemocratic they all are. So where do you go to? But as civil society, is that a space that we need to be putting our energy into? Because really, when we finish see to the fact that children don't know how to read, people need food gardens to survive. When we finish do all of that work, who's got time to read a 400 Rand page report, realistically?
Karen, go to a mic so that we don't have, there's no lag. You know, television people, we must make sure you prioritize the time. So Auntie Jenny's question is a legitimate one, specifically around if we're seeing a gap, if we aren't being adequately represented by the political parties in the space, and we are doing the work. Sometimes we've been co-opted into government without realizing it, but also without government acknowledgement or funding as civil society. Is there opportunities for civil society to form movements that could contest and be able to take away some of that power, or at least leverage some of that power for their own good and the work that you're doing already? Yes, sir.
Yeah, my question.
Your name is Paul Soti?
Yeah, my name is Paul Soti.
Yes.
Yeah, do work here in Durban. And I know the commentator spoke about the skills development and exchange. That's part of the work that I do. My question really is to all our speakers today. It would be interesting if our political commentator was here. My question goes to the system of the economy that could be, which is slowly, I think, gravitating maybe away. I don't know whether it's an open, I don't know whether it's a mixed or market or command economical system which is used. But my concern would be how much of this allocated budget will be lost to the mafia cartels. Because you begin to see that, of course, with the ESCOM and issues that are beginning to come out of there. But I'm more concerned even around when you begin to look in the areas where you stay, there are people who rock up and say, in your house, we're gonna divide. So we're gonna take maybe 5 rooms, and then we're gonna come every month and collect the money. This is happening, beginning to happen in most of the businesses around. Maybe if we talk of the ESCOM, it will be something too big and beyond us. But where we are, we're beginning to see that organized rackets of mafia. So my question maybe to our speakers is how much perhaps of the allocated budget would fall away and just go into these rackets? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. Begezenzo and Upu Dilapana in the back. Can I just ask quickly, do you have any questions for Crystal directly? Not yet. I'll still take you, but if you have a question for Crystal. Okay, so I'm gonna take you, Cyril, and then Tessa and Bali, just to direct a question to Crystal so that Crystal can respond. And then we're gonna have both of yourselves, Banomzan, after that. Yes, Cyril, yes.
Greeting, Crystal.
So,
All right. So
are you flirting?
No.
What's happening?
All right.
All right. Okay. Carry on.
Well, it was fascinating presentation there with regards to one of the plans that you think we can take forward as a youth in South Africa. But I wanted to ask with regards to, because right now we know that South Africa is part of BRICS, and we know that China right now is the second largest economy in the world. But now there's been a shrink with some of the developing countries with regards to globalization, which we've actually experienced, which has brought some good and also has brought some of demise into this country, predominantly with regards to production-wise, manufacturing-wise, because the bulk of the goods that we have comes from China. Now, with regards to that, what can we take? What are the initiatives or steps we can take going forward so we can get the country, the youth being involved in this production and manufacturing? Because we know this country predominantly is a service-based economy, meaning we rely mostly on retail, hospitality, human resources, and etc. But we're not actually doing enough to be productive. So what are the plans that we do have in place for the youth to get them engaged in the economy and making us more a productive wise economy?
Thanks, Brian. Do you want me to just take that question, or do you want to take another one first?
Yeah, you have. Sorry. Mbali is going to ask you a question.
Cool.
And now.
So my question is for
Sorry, okay. It's the one that was at the front. Yeah, the handout.
Is it on? Oh.
Yeah.
So my question is for Crystal. I was quite intrigued with your slides, and I think it was in your last one, you were saying that you advocate for, I think you said for sort of almost one youth employment something. Could you just unpack that a little bit more and what you guys envision that would look like? And then secondly, what are the ways in which youth capital tries to influence or lobby or get some of the key ideas that you have about finishing youth unemployment, or at least, you know, targeting youth unemployment into government spaces, into some kind of policies? What has been the ways that you have done it? Has it been, what kind of experience have you had? And you know, just share a little bit about that with us, because I think it's also very interesting. You seem to be a little bit further down the line with some of your engagements on that, in that regard. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
So mine isn't direct.
Okay, cool. You can respond to the questions you've had so far, Crystal. I think Tessa
Thanks,
will...
Brian. Cool. Thanks, guys. So just to the first point on the industrialization kind of approach and the manufacturing sector, I think that South Africa is a very different setting. And my experience with talking to young people, you know, I know if I speak to kind of the senior people in government and industrialization and big industry and factories, and that's something that a lot of kind of old economists will tell you. My experience of talking to young people is they don't want that kind of work. And I think we must move away from a thinking of, you know, young people must be thankful for whatever jobs are available, you know, but more well-resourced young people can make a choice for themselves about the kind of future they want. But if you're poor, then you must just take what you get. And I think we need to be careful about doing that. I think that the world of work has shifted, and COVID has sped up what the gig economy and what creating a livelihood for yourself can look like beyond a 9 to 5. And I think we need to train young people now for that reality, because that reality is already here. And I think what South Africa has done poorly and continues to do poorly is it's not forward thinking enough. We're just reactive. We're trying to build the plane while it's flying, as opposed to saying, these are the skills that the economy is going to need. You know, in the next 5 to 10 years, we need these skills. And Youth Capital, in collaboration with the DG Murray Trust of Funds, is starting to think about this question. What are going to be the skills that are required? And what are the pipelines to get young people there and qualified? You know, getting a piece of paper and having the practical experience are two very different things. And that's a big disconnect that employers are telling us about. So I think we need to look at what are the sectors that are realistic in a South African setting. I love that you mentioned tourism. I think tourism is something that's such an an easy in for young people. You can get entry-level jobs and work your way up and create a life for yourself around the tourism industry. And I don't think we leverage that enough. You know, I'm based in Cape Town, so you know, tourism and the wine industry, all of these things I think are always going to be around. And I think the CETAs need to do a better work of pipelining young people into particular skill sectors that are going to be needed by the economy in the future. So that's kind of my natural answer to that. And then to Youth Capital's approach, we have found that the best approach is to actually put out these pieces of research. We've become very well known for being quick about it. So we're not a rigorous, you know, university entity that's going to do a study with young people and then publish it 3 years from now, right? We do a study and within 3 months, the report is out. You've seen the slides and the design. It's snappy, it's short and to the point. And that's caught the attention of public officials. We had a documentary that we put together for Youth Day last year, which has caught the attention of some political figures. And because our 10-point action plan is quite broad, we've been quite targeted in our approach. So every single kind of thing that we're speaking about. So the Basic Education Employment Initiative, we're in conversations with Kate Phillips there around our insights and trying to get the presidency's team is working on that to think about exit strategies. And we're hearing that language come through more there. And we take credit for that. Then, you know, in young people getting certified, we've done a lot of work around the Matric Rewrite program and worked with DBE and SA Youth to get a hub going for young people, because just having the knowledge about where to register and how to write was a big barrier to entry for many young people. And so it's very specific for each of the points, because there is no one size fits all. There's no one place where all of this is going to live. Which brings me to answer the first part of your question, which was around an institution. So what we're saying is particularly for public employment opportunities. So these short-term public opportunities that are funded by taxpayer money, to have that sit in one institution. I'm not saying that all of youth development must be in one institution, but that particular piece where we can easily track young people who go into these programs, the skills that they learn and how that sets them up for the next step, whether that's further study, self-employment or employment. We need to be able to track all of that in a more coordinated manner that we are doing now to see what is working and what is not. And so I think one institute to manage that is what we're advocating for. I'm happy to engage with you further on Youth Capital's approach, but it's really, you know, snapshot research, short snappy reports, opinion pieces, and a lot of media engagement, Twitter spaces that really gets the messaging out. We've been around for 5 years now, and I think we're starting to see traction around some of our points being picked up by various people within government. So that's it from me. Thank you, everyone, and sorry I couldn't be there in person.
Thank you very much, Crystal. It's okay when you're online as well, because it helps us look edgy and stuff when we're able to show you on screen. Can you give her a round of applause? Doing hybrid things, you know, for young people. No, thank you very much, Crystal. We really appreciate your willingness to be a part of this, your patience for having sat through the entire presentations. I think it speaks millions in terms of your commitment to the work, but also to the process. And all the best of luck for the next engagement that you have at 1. So we'll let you leave now, but we appreciate that. Thank you very much. Now,
thanks,
Tessa,
everyone.
You wanted to say
Bye.
something? I think there's a mic at your table. Yeah.
Yo, guys, I need to say something that's just kind of a broad overarching thing. Please, 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 in the run up to 2024 and beyond, the thing we must all do is not give up on government. The thing that we've heard in our work at the Ribonia Circle over the last year or so, we're tired of government, we're tired of politics, we're tired of all of this. Just tell government to leave us alone. We're just going to start, you know, working on our own. We will build our own communities. We'll do all of these things ourselves. And I just want to implore us all, if anything of today's discussion must stay with us, is that the money that is in that we're talking about is our money. It is our money. And it's our money because it's our government. Whoever is at the helm of government at any given time is just the driver of the vehicle at the time. It's our car. And at this point, if the car is driving towards a cliff, it's not enough just to stand outside and say, "Whoa, driver, whoa." Or to say the driver is about to find out what a bad driver they are. when the car crashes, because it's our car and it's our resources, it's our money. And so for all the work that we particularly do in civil society outside of that money, part of our job is to fight for that money. All of these budgeting conversations that we're having conversations about our money, please. And I'm begging you to fight for that money, to fight for government, to fight for our ability in a democracy to co-govern, to govern with. And that's why the point that was made even about opposition parties is so important. Those opposition parties are going in there to go and contend and contest again for our money and our resources and our power. We must not leave anybody alone when it's our stuff at stake. Because as I said earlier, we can all say, no, politics is not for me. I don't care about politics. I'm not a politician, all of that. Until we come up with a system that doesn't send those same people we don't care about to put our money in their hands, we must care. Please, please, please. Let's not give up on government. Let's not give up on fighting for our right to co-govern this country because it's our money.
Thank you. Hey, to the mali. Pegizenzo and then you put the Wathuka bafo ngathi ubungazo ngikuzumile sorry.
Yabonga. Sanibona. Ibizo ubhekisenzo kwamabasa. So mina kuloko okukhulunywa mhlambe ngihlabe kumxhwele umfowethu uSobani umekhuluma ngokuthi mhlambe ama skills kakhulukazi abantu abasha banawo.
Mhlambe ungalinyusa nje izwi ungangayishintsha ilanguage kodwa unyuse izwi khona abantu bezokwazi ukutolika kulabo abahleli nabo. Yeah.
Okay. Ngithi ukungihlaba umxhwele ilo kakhuluma ngawo umfowethu ukuthi mhlambe amakhono sabantu abasha sinawo. Kodwa ngibone mhlambe mawuthi sinawo siwasebenzisa kancane ngoba manje izintweni eziningi ezizenzayo siyakhala sithi eParliament balele abantu abadala ngoba baholi bempesheni laba balapha. Kodwa ke thina futhi nathi asenze lutho kulwaloko sispend imali esingenayo sidawo utshwala. Ukubona kanjani lokho? Ubona ngokuthi kuma social media sikuposta kanjani izinto ezinjengokuthi drive imoto esingayi afford ebizayo sibe singazondla izingane noma ukwazi ukulekelela umphakathi sibeke utshwala obizayo lapha bo 500 kodwa manje ulala phansi. So lokho khombisa ukuthi awunangqondo noma ucabange kahle yabo. So kwesinye isikhathi sesingaba blame laba abadla imali zethu kodwa ngoba nathi siyabavumela ngokuthi sidle lencane ekhona ngendlela ebudedengu. Kunomunye umlungu wakwathi kule mpela sonto abantu abasha ngisazi ukuthi kwakuyini bazohlangana mhlambe basebenzisa umuntu eyedwa imali engango 300 uphuzweni oludakayo ukuthi babhiyoze. Mangase kuthiwa leyo mali bayayihlanganisa. Uyazi ukuthi ngakho imali enkulu kanjani engakwazi ukuthi ibahlumelelise bona whatever abafuna ukuyenza emphakathini ibe impumelelo. Masingase kuthiwa nje asike sibeke isiminofu kancane labo 200 besiminofu esibaphuza every weekend. Uyazi singazakhela ilibrary yethu. Yabo kodwa kunaloko sibulala ama library sintshontsha ama computer khona soda utshwala kunokuthi engabe sibeka le mali yatshwala sakhe something. So ngeke ngithi asingaloku nathi si blame abanye abantu sike sinuke nje amakhwapho ukuthi ikuphi esikwenzayo kuzokwenza ukuthi impilo zethu zibe ngcono ngoba laba lapha banemali egcwele amakhukhu noma sebephumile ezikhundleni kuba sebenzela nje ukuthi bathola impesheni eningi yabo. Ngicabanga ukuthi bekuyiloko nje bengifisa ukukudlulisa ngibonga.
Yeah. No, guys, like alcohol is not the problem, guys. Don't stop blaming alcohol. No, but I agree. I think it's important that in as much as young people have the ability to blame our politicians at the front, to some extent, and I'd say this slightly differently, that young people aren't using all of the tools at their disposal in order to demand the accountability and demand representation that they seek. If we're absent at the polls as an example of our participation, then potentially it means that we're not exhausting all of the tools that are available. I think if as a starting point, let's just vote and see what happens. As a starting point, because I think even if you were to go out and vote for the same parties that exist right now, it's going to be concerning to see young people turn out in the masses. They'll just be surprised. Young people are voting, and potentially then it might have an impact. I saw an exchange between the Wits SRC Twitter account and I'm not sure if it was one of the politicians or something like that, but essentially they were talking about this whole issue of the protest that's happening in Gauteng at the moment. And the Wits SRC account was like, no, it's not a problem. Whatever you say and the way in which you characterize us is wrong. But at the same time, we'll see you at 2024. And that's where our accountability, or that's where we'll demand our accountability. And that was quite interesting because hopefully it strikes the fear of God into whichever politician that they might have been speaking to. But of course, it's important that we use all of the tools that are available to us. And the people that you're talking about in Midrand, apparently they are quite famous. Pants, as you said, there's no couch, there's no kitchen, it's just yeah, man, it's unfortunate the way capitalism has consumed us. Kodwa utshwala again, guys. Ningabuthindi utshwala kubu right school lapha. Yeah.
Good evening.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
We do apologize if we've been dragging for so long.
My name is Mbonsen. I'm coming from Progressive Professionals. My question was directed to Tobani, but I'm not sure whether he has left.
Sorry, apologies for Tobani. He's just to political commentators being dragged.
Yes.
The cabinet reshuffle, so he's been called for radio interviews.
But I think Tessa Ombali might
they'll be able to respond
on this one.
Very capable. Even me, I'm a political analyst by part-time. So
you spoke on integrated development. And my question or my concern is this. I think it's 2019, if I'm not mistaken, under the sixth administration. The current president introduced the district development model, which was trying to all the spheres of government to speak in one voice and do one thing. I think you've touched it earlier, Tessa, whereby you'll find that in a community or in a ward, a school is needed, or a bridge is needed, or any something to develop a ward. Then the councillor will say, no, it's not my baby. Let me speak to the province, and the province will say, no, it's not our baby. Let's speak to national. Where is this development model sitting? Is it working, or it was just a good document? Oh, I'm glad you're back. Where is it sitting? Is it working? Because I don't think we will be having this protest every day, whereby you find that infrastructure is being destroyed. Children are not going to school, people are not going to, if it was working, you'll find that a small thing which needs to be communicated between these spheres of government. One is pulling back, saying, no, it's not my baby, but who is getting frustrated at the end of the day? It's us as citizens. So where is this document sitting? Is it implementable? Is it working? Where is it sitting? Maybe you can share light on that.
Thank you very much. Tobani, so the question is, where is DDM? Is DDM a thing that people were serious about? But also, DDM wasn't a new thing. It's just reframing of existing. So yeah, so I'll allow Mbali first. You want to start? He just came through from the interview, so yeah. So I'll start with Mbali, and then Tessa, and then Tobani. Response to what's come out, but also just a wrap up to your discussion today. Before we break for lunch, just this is a reminder that we're holding people from lunch.
Okay, Monge. Yeah, but in my opening remarks, that exact model, when she was still young, it's been something that's been spoken about for ages, which is why I said we need to relook the way that our spheres of governments are done, because we keep having this problem, because it gives them the ability to say, this one won't do it, I can't do it, it's not mine, no, province, national, whatever. So a short answer to your question is they don't know, so we don't know. And it just depends on the project and who's willing at that particular time to sometimes take accountability for it. And as someone who's been in the province, there have been many times when we have gone to do oversight on something only to be told, maybe this is not something that is under the mandate of the province. It sits somewhere else, or we don't have any say on what's been happening, which is weird because our provincial structure actually in many cases is one of just being oversight or being, almost like an implementing agent. And that's it. It doesn't have any ability to do much more than that. And where the power should sit on some of these things is actually at the municipal level, but then they are hamstrung. And then you get also the fact that they have hierarchies in their political parties. And so, even though something can fall under umasipala, mhlawumbe umayor usaba ukuthi u-MEC ungaphezu kwakhe in whatever political party in the hierarchy of the party. And so that's a whole nother situation that has to be dealt with because of the way that we have decided to structure our politics and the way that we do things. And so even though for some things they might be empowered, even legislatively, to do something, if they know that it's kulusake from a political standing point in the party at a provincial level as an MEC, even though they don't have the power legislatively to say something, or original chair. What does the regional chair of the political party say? So we are in big trouble. And unfortunately, unless we are willing to change it, and that model is something that's been spoken about, it's one of the things that I said, sometimes you'll hear the president speak about something in SONA and the priorities he says are there, but then you will see no plan for it or no financing for it. So it just becomes something that we talk about, but there's never any follow-up to whether it's going to be implemented. So we're going to be sitting with this position going forward until we decide we're changing the way that things are actually done. And it's possible. We just need to make sure that we actually start getting it done.
So I'm going to be a little less diplomatic than Mbali and say, scrap provinces. Let's just scrap provinces, guys. They're meaningless. Policy and implementation is what's needed. Policy at national, implementation at local. The second thing that brings about is, so I used to be a university lecturer, and I always used to say to my colleagues, you should take your best professors to teach your first years. Your foundational places of delivery is where your best people should be. In this country, we send our most mediocre people to local government level. So just the people that we don't have any time for must go to the place of coal-face delivery. That's the reason why we're failing. We send our worst people to the place where it matters most. And then we create a layer in the middle called provinces that does almost nothing in the form of actual delivery, but talks big about policies they can't make. We just need to rethink the whole thing. The last thing I will say, and it's also got to do with where our personnel lies, and last night's much anticipated and greatly disappointing cabinet reshuffle. Last night, the president ended up creating a super ministry called the presidency that has 4 ministers in it. There are 4 ministers and multiple deputies in the president's office. There's just a ridiculousness about that, just generally speaking, right? We really need to start thinking about, are we getting the right kind of capabilities in the right places to do the right kind of work? Or are we just creating as many positions as possible? And I say this in response to the district development model, because what they're actually doing is they're creating a new sphere of government at the district level that actually doesn't have a budget, that is actually bringing people together who are supposed to be working together already and putting them in a place where you're now saying, here's a new project to do. Part of the reason why the presidency is as full as it is at the moment is because the president has decided that the way he's going to show that he can deliver is by doing projects rather than governance. Project management on infrastructure, project management on youth development, project management on DDM. He's just doing projects. It's like you could be macro, but you want to be a spaza shop instead. Because it's easier to show that you can make money in a spaza shop, but it's hard to run macro. We deserve somebody who wants to run macro. This thing of just creating spaza shop things must just end.
Yeah. I did say also, it's this thing of being young.
It's one of the handhelds as well.
I did say, Ugusi, this thing of being younger is a problem. You see, all the people are speaking serious things. I must come in. But so first of all, I want to apologize. I want to apologize. The reason I dashed out, and I hope Brian did inform the room, was not any disrespect to the room or whatsoever. Just some people who have been pestering me, and I couldn't make them hold wait any longer and all those things. But I'm just going to give maybe closing remarks, not really responses. In this country, we like to appear like we're doing something when we're doing nothing. We like it. We go on TV, we say big things, and then when you ask where these things are happening, no one knows. And the next year, we are going to come together, wear the nicest clothes, most expensive, and say other nice things, and we are doing nothing. And part of that is because, and I'm sorry to say this, is because, of course, this is deliberate on the part of government, but also on our side, we need to take a bit of responsibility. We have 60 million in this country, 42.2 million of them eligible to vote, which means they are adult, but they are political and civic education level. And that means once we don't know what needs to happen in politics and how it needs to happen, we can't hold anyone accountable. Let me make an example. I was in the SRC at some time and I was a student activist. I used to fight with some of these people. This one was in the same university. I used to fight with some of them. I say to them, if you say me as an SRC member, I must hold someone's hands and go to a lecture at Tessa Dooms who has not marked or graded the assignment properly. That's what I must do. When Fees Department is not helping them, I must hold them by hand because I must show I'm on the ground, I'm an activist. It's not my job. I'm not an extension of university administration. My concern is at a governance level. So I sit at college, at the training with colleges. I sit at college committee, academic affairs board. That's where I sit to speak policy and governance issues. I sit at schools board. That's where I sit. I can't be holding hands with people, hey, fees must help you. I must go there. But you know what happens? Because the electorate is not properly educated about what needs to happen. They elect Temba, who holds their hands to rest, and they leave Tobani, who can argue their issues at the college affairs board. And this is what happens in governance in South Africa. The people you elect as your councillors are not the people you should be electing. Because when they go to council, they can't say anything. They go to adopt things there. Because what we need of councillors is not technocrats. These are people who need to be able to understand government policy and be able to use it to hold people accountable. Because the municipality has technocrats as city managers and whatnot, and those people need to be held accountable. And I agree with Tessa. Our president is concerned about a super presidency. He's concerned about events. He wants to do small things and be clapped hands for. He wants to do a GPV for summit and adopt some policy, and then after that, do nothing about it. And then come 5 years later, another year, hold another GPV summit. And then now he has created a super presidency. Too many people who don't know what they're doing there. I don't even believe we must have a ministry of presidents. I don't even believe that minister of presidency thing must exist. Let alone that we must have 4 of them. I don't believe there must be 1 then. I believe in this country, if we're really serious and have a proper conversation, we can have 10 to 15 max ministries. And the rest will be units, will be local government. Again, I want to agree with Tessa. We must have a real conversation about this provinces thing. I'm not saying they must go away, but we must have, because some of them don't make sense. Some of them don't make sense. I can even go as far as some district municipalities.
Yeah.
They don't make sense. Like you go, I was born in Ilembe district in Watubuza. where I stay, just short story
Sure.
to show how this thing got happen. So where I was born, it's during COP 125, what to use. On one side of my grandmother's house, if you look very far, is in Tsimba River. This side there is Uchugela. This is the funny part. Where I stay, I can point Mapumulo municipality. I can point Mandeni municipality, and I stay in Watuguza, but all that separates us are rivers. How does that make sense? That in the same area, we go to the same river and everything. When they build a RDP house, what we call RDP houses, municipality was a Mapumulo Wakite, Watuguza builds their own thing, and Mandeni builds their own thing. There can be a crisis in the same community, but we can't call Watuguza because it's not their area, but it's our neighbor who has a problem. So some of these demarcations must be really looked at in terms of, do they make sense? We must have a new strategy and a new way of thinking in terms of how do we make demarcations, but demarcations that are going to make implementation of programs and government policy more possible and not difficult as it is currently. Because there are people in this country who are district mayors, but you can ask them tomorrow, what are you doing? What have you done in the past 5 months? They can't tell you. Because quite frankly, like premiers, they have nothing to do. Because what does a district mayor do when there are local municipalities below him? What does he do? The same with premier. There are many mayors. Then there's you. What are you doing? But of course, you can open a clinic there, do this there, take a few pictures, put it on Facebook, and people will see that you are working. But you're actually doing nothing. Of course, these days they follow each other around and take pictures. When someone can't do their own job, just following the other one to go be seen that he's doing something, and something is not happening in that department where he's supposed to be working.
Premier in waiting.
I don't understand the thing. It's just a love of pictures and all of those things, and some leader of government business story that people, and just last point, to clear for some people in the room, a leader of government business is not some big fancy thing. It's just a coordination of issues between, of events and activities between government and the legislature. It's not official position, man. You don't need to be somewhere on official ceremonies because you are a leader of government business, isn't it?
Yeah, Siyabonga kakhulu. I think there's a burning question, but this is over land. The burning question. There's a burning question. There are two burning hands, so I can't take one over the other. On that basis, I'm going to close today's engagement with our gratitude as DDP. Thank you for being a part of this conversation. Thank you for taking an interest in your country's affairs. Thank you for doing the little that you do in your communities and your constituencies. Without your participation and your civic mindedness in the different spaces that you occupy, I think we'd be in a far worse position as a city, as a province, and definitely as a country. And so we appreciate those and those. I think the invitation for the 22nd, 23rd, and 30th will be out by this Friday. Of course, our database is quite big, so it might not reach your email by Friday, even by Monday. But we do look forward to seeing you on those dates as well. Thank you and enjoy lunch. Tandiwe will be handing out coupons for, coupons, but let me stress this one. If you arrived after registration was closed and you haven't signed the register, please do sign the register. It's important for accountability. So if you go to lunch without having signed the register, it means that you're unaccounted for financially. So it's important that you do sign the register. That's all it is. We're not trying to stop you from having food. Just have the food, but sign the register and be accountable as well. She'll be upstairs for the register at this. Oh, where will you be? Oh, the lunch is at second floor, but she's here to give you your coupon and your ticket. Thank you to those of you who joined us online. We hope your lunch is good as well. Sorry that we can't deliver. Take care. Thank you. Thank you very much.